Missed setting up. Setting up our meeting. Still setting up. Redirecting. All right, so we should be live now.
How do you tell?
Yeah, all right, we're live because
Hey.
Okay, I'm going to close out this.
Setting up our meeting.
I'm gonna, okay, all right, so we are set up. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Brace. I am the Vice President of Vintage Computer Federation. I am also the showrunner for VCF East. I'm also event manager for all the events that we do at Vintage Computer Federation in Wall, New Jersey. Today we have Leo Binkowski. He was a NABU developer. And we also have for support, we have DJ Schurz. He is a son of the founder of NABU, and Brian Johnson, who did an emulator for NABU. So welcome everyone, and welcome Leo.
Well, thanks a lot for welcoming me. It's nice to be here again. This
All
time,
right.
probably less choppy.
Yes, so the reason why we're doing this follow-up is because yes, during the events, there was a number of network errors and problems on sites. Did not have to do anything to do with the bandwidth. There was other issues involved. So he re-recorded his talk, and that's published on his channel as well as the VCF channel. And I appended some of the Q&A, but even that's a little choppy. So I wanted to have a follow-up. So in case anybody wanted to follow up with any questions and answers. So I'll sort of get the ball rolling here. I have a number of questions here that as I was looking at your YouTube talk, I had a number of questions, and so let me see. So you had just released the Pac-Man source code.
Yeah, I had a lot of. I was working on it for a long time. Actually, I announced it way back in December that I had it, and I've had it for a long time, but I hadn't really fixed it. See, it was really just a copy of my working diskettes, and I hadn't looked at it either. So it was like, I got to curate this stuff. People say just dump it in GitHub, and everybody else will figure it out. And I was going, no, I haven't figured it out. And people are going to start asking questions. It'll be the 1,000 questions that I won't be prepared for. So I needed to fix it myself. And in fact, there were mangled parts of the code I copied it. And so I kind of tried to fix those. So we don't know if the whole thing is working, but I think all the pieces are there, and I think it can be repaired so that anybody can use it. And so, yeah, that was kind of a neat. Like, I mean, Pac-Man was literally one of the first game. It was literally the first game that I was working on NABU, but then I stopped and I ended up working on Roulette, because that was the one they wanted. So, and in fact, we didn't have the rights to Pac-Man, and nobody cared at the moment. So I only got to it after. So even if you look at the source code, people who've seen it on GitHub, you'll see that my coding style and my commenting style and everything evolved from literally from nothing, because it's my first professional product, into a complete piece of software that actually other people ended up using as templates for their software for stuff that they were doing. So Dig Dug, I was completed Pac-Man, and a lot of pieces of the framework of NABU of Pac-Man were used for Dig Dug as well, but not the core game, of course. And that also was interesting because we got all of those rights at the same time. My boss worked on it too. We had a neat environment with like having we didn't have a boss who was just doing all the paperwork. He was actually working on it. We could go to him for help and that kind of stuff. And he'd be working late nights with us. And in fact, he ended up working on not only Dig Dug, there was a game called Flash Cards that he worked on, which was a kid's game, but he ended up making what we consider the magnum opus for NABU that I'd really love to recover, which is Manager's Baseball. Manager's Baseball is like a 50-segment game, and it was literally rotisserie baseball, the stuff that you played in bars and so on. And it was such a nice game, and we worked so hard on it. And I was one of the guys that worked on it. It was me, Joaquin Fernandez, John Short, and our other director of content, Les Purley, and everybody works so hard on that one. And I can't find it yet. I haven't got it yet, so I'd really like to get that one mostly off of the hard drive is what I'm looking for. Any other questions? All
right, so then you had said future releases. So you have partial code for Music Maker and Paint Pots.
Yeah, the Music Maker, I'm not exactly sure where the code came from. part of it was some other application, and part of it somebody was working on, and I ended up within my hands to finish it. And we ended up making a couple of different applications. Music Maker, which is basically something that you can put notes down on the screen and it will play them. And there was all kinds. It was literally notes on the staff, and you could save them. Moreover, you could save them to the floppy drive if you had them. So we had things like jukebox mode in it and so on. So for Christmas, we literally took out the whole catalog and put Christmas songs, so that when people booted up, it was completely different. It was playing Jingle Bells and that kind of stuff. So that's one of the things we have now. PaintPot was neat because that's just a drawing program that we had, and that's also, I just have the pieces of. Alpha Blast, I think I have the whole thing, and that one's in Fortran. And that was because I had to change the titles for it last, and it was in my box of working floppies. I have a big piece of Manager's Baseball, the stuff that I worked on, which was all about the roster and the batting lineup and player management, really. It was all the stuff that I did.
Don't forget your favorite too, or my favorite.
What the hell was that? Oh, Minor 2049er.
Yeah.
Yes, I also worked on Minor 2049er, also with
There's a
Joaquin Fernandez and
full
Pat
page
Allison.
Minor for a 29er ad for the NABU.
Oh, wow. Actually, I haven't seen that in ages.
Yeah, and it's got
You
all
have the
games.
Pac-Man ad? That Pac-Man ad is one of the best ones.
I do have the Pac-Man one too. I'll have to
Because
find
there's
it.
a full color one.
I'll surprise everyone throughout the interview with little snippets of
Yeah.
blast from the past.
So yeah, I mean, we had a lot of fun. It sometimes seems like all of NABU was revolving on me, and I can assure you that it did not. It was just that everybody sort of had a lot of fun. I'm just one of the people that's a little bit more up on it and remembering it. I had lunch with my old boss, John Short, and I'm planning to have lunch with him and Les Purley, who is also the director of content development, and we all worked on it, as I said, on Managers Baseball together, and we worked on a ton of different stuff together. And after NABU, we worked on with other companies. We all joined Canadian Technology Marketing Group. Les and I joined Arbortext, and which eventually got eaten by PTC and that kind of stuff. So we've all our careers have revolved around each other, and we've been friends long after NABU, and we still see each other. And now I'm getting reintroduced to some of the other people who are saying, "Hey, I'm seeing on YouTube," and so on. So I'd like to really talk to them. Like Tim Ranger, I started having a conversation in email about. I'd really like to have him on one of the sessions where we're discussing Qbert, because there's a lot of stuff that we did around that time that I don't remember exactly. And Qbert was like the fastest game we ever did. We did it literally within like 6 weeks. And it's just when two guys were really in tune with each other. I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. He'll do this, do this, do this, and all of a sudden it came together as one game pretty quickly. And that was one of the best fun sort of development things, because it was one of the games that we videotaped the game in an arcade and literally reversed engineered it from a videotape of 2 hours long, that we sat there with pizza and stuff watching and making notes about what happened here and there and that kind of stuff on the screen, figuring out how to squash the screen because of the weird portrait mode of the video games and that kind of stuff, and spending hours on graph paper doing that. But while we were at NABU and that kind of stuff, it was all sort of natural. We would spend 16 hours a day and then say, "Oh, I'm too tired to go on. I'm going to crash now." That's it. And we just leave. And that's how it would sort of work. It was very, very dynamic.
All right.
I can keep on rambling.
That's okay. That's why we're here. We're here
Yeah.
to hear your ramblings. So sometimes you use literary references like Lewis Carroll, The Ghost of Naboo Past. Is that because you were a big fan, or is that just a sort of a fun thing that you did?
Well, when your formative years of pop culture and everything are at the same time you're in work, and it's all gets wrapped together. We did do a lot of stuff, and if anybody who's seen the Grunt Press things, you'll notice there was a lot of creative stuff in there, and we did that. Whether we were sitting there, like for instance, I talked about the chess game in the presentation, and how Chang, I said, "Chang, we've got to make like the longest opening animation. It's got to be for chess. It's got to be the longest." And as I said, when I went through QA, you should have seen the hate comments about how this is too long, this is too long, this is too long. I said, that's exactly what we were trying to do, and I had comments like that for Pac-Man. I made Pac-Man exactly like the arcade game and the speed exactly. But if you play it right now, you'll see that it's actually a little bit slow on the starting. Well, the thing is, they ran it through QA and they said kids aren't going to be able to play this. Are you trying to entertain kids, or are you trying to do a beautiful, perfect representation? I said, I'm trying to entertain kids. So speed went down, changed the speeding timings and that kind of stuff, made it more playable for a wider audience. And it was appreciated, by the way, that a lot of people played it, and got a lot of comments for it, got a lot of I used to get fan mail, which was kind of cool. Because sometimes they wouldn't say exactly who I was, but they would say the programmer of Pac-Man is doing fan mail, and I would respond to it and that kind of stuff. And sometimes they had contests, and that dude over there, DJ, sometimes they had kids of executives show up at our desk. So we're like tours, and I think he did, but I don't know. I don't remember. But I used to keep a bag full of NABU pins, and I had lots of candies and that kind of stuff. But that was mostly for me, so I just had that as a matter of course. And I would give stuff, and I would show people, and I'd usually show them the cheat keys that I put in a game, because that's always a special thing to tell somebody, and they remember that knowledge forever, right? And I said, don't tell your friends. Don't tell your friends. This is secret knowledge for you. What you do is you make it happen, and then they'll be begging you for life for the cheat keys. So, and you'll be known as the wizard of this game. So that never really got out, but I'm telling them now, because Pac-Man did not have a cheat key. If you notice, you can look through the code, and there's not even a reference to it, because I didn't need to. When I gave the game to QA, the first version I gave them 200 free men. So I said, just go all the way. You can make it all the way with 200 free men. And they did. So I didn't leave any cheat to that. I made a new version that set the amount of men, and that was the end of that. But for Miner 2049, there is a cheat key. And I'll even say what it is right now, just so everybody can try to figure out doing it. What you need to do, and you got to have like octopus hands or other people to help you. You need to type Sim Shift Control L for me, Leo, at the same time as you're holding down on the joystick. So if you can manage that feat of acrobatics, then after that, you can press anywhere from 1 to 10, or any of the digits, and you will hit any of the different levels in the game. Now, in order to see the Easter egg in the upper right-hand side of the screen, you have to jump up and down about 10 times. I'm not sure. I can't remember the number. It's in the code somewhere. But then the next time the lever clears, it will show up again. So you'll see what it is. I haven't been able to do it, at least, and it's kind of embarrassing, but I know it's there. I've looked it in the code. So it's kind of maddening that I've lost the agility to do it. And somebody else can do it on one of the NABU systems. It doesn't work on MAME, Brian. Sorry, I tried it. I can't get it to happen at all there. So yeah, that was one of the other Easter eggs. Tim Ranger put one in Laser Attack, which he mentioned, but I don't know how that one works. And I know that other people put Easter eggs in their games, but I mean, I haven't been able to talk to them, and they probably don't remember either. There was definitely one for Dig Dug. And there was something that I put in the player roster that I got to look that allowed you to put, like, it made all my friends appear as players. Literally all their names came up. Literally as a roster, it was my whole friends list. So that was pretty good. And you could see it in the code, but I don't have all of the pieces together to make it all happen. So I'll try that in some future time. What else do we got?
All right, so this is, I guess the DJ had answered this, but I'll ask it. So do you know any of the folks who developed the hardware? There are a number of oddities that he's curious about.
Okay, so I know some of the folks. So let's talk about some names. I met one of the engineers, Mark Victor, as far as Mark Victor, and I think that he's working for NRC. I don't know, probably everybody's retired now. Eric Mesdag worked at was in engineering and worked with us, and they worked and he worked closely with the operating system, what we called iOS before Apple called it iOS. It's internal operating system is what we called it. And I remember there was a few teams. Let's see. There was also there was a couple of guys that actually figured to design the keyboard and the operating system, that kind of stuff. Bill Bourne, and I'm trying to remember of some of the other ones. Oh, Ken Leese also designed a lot of what the NABU and now. Let me try to remember some other names. The head of engineering at the time when I started was Eric Antela. And they had a whole pile of guys from the CBC, Canada Broadcasting Corporation, the producers and that kind of stuff, Michael Bate and Chris Wallace and so on. And they were they were supposed to be the games production guys, because there was no such thing. Well, you couldn't call up and say, I need a bunch of I want games done anywhere, because nobody was doing them. You know, it was like 5 companies in the whole planet writing video games professionally. And so these guys were just TV show producers and radio show producers, and they became video game producers. And Michael Bate was the guy that sort of hooked up the contract with Johnny Hart. So that's how we got all those BC games. So we got the BC Trivia and Wiley's Dictionary. And of course, anybody who's seen them right now, as you mentioned earlier, they're not woke. They're something you cannot that just being distributed today is kind of like, oops, it's a little bit cringy. So for instance, the two of the characters in BC Trivia are Fat Broad and Cute Chick. So that kind of lets you know the tone right there. And the thing is that that wasn't the point. And in the 80s, it wasn't the point, but it just ended up that today, it's a different time, different place. But as I mentioned earlier, with something is that NABU was actually we had a lot of females in our company. We had, like, normally you would think like a computer company would be like literally 100% guys, like engineers and so on. Not NABU. I would say it was closer to probably maybe 65% guys and the rest female. And like all the marketing, most of the QA, all of them were it was actually kind of nice. We had departmental secretaries and that kind of stuff, but everybody was working towards it. I mean, Laura Schenning was one of the developers that I worked with that came out of the computer camp with me. But there were other. There was Donna Frum was working on educational software. There was lots of. There was a lot of mix. And the thing is that everybody didn't know what they were doing. We were making up as we were going along, but it was fun doing that. So we would spend all hours making it up as we went along. And it was funny that some of the stuff that we did is just experiments. Like for instance, there's a poker game. I don't know, did DJ's poker game work? I don't know if anybody's loaded it.
I couldn't tell you that, but I can answer also about like the hardware question too. So I was talking to my uncle John Boback. So in my family, the three people that were involved was John Boback, who is John Kelly's really good friend. I believe John Boback came from IBM as well with John Kelly. So John Kelly came from IBM and started NABU with John Boback. Then it was my father and my uncle Howard Schurz. So what had happened is I got this email. I just loaded it up here, and it's a really long email. But I was talking back and forth with multiple threads in here, and my uncle had said that they were in. Let's see, where were we here? Whoa, there's too much to go. They were in Mont Sainte Marie. Is that in Ottawa? Where is that?
No, it's Mont Sainte Marie is a ski resort. It's just
ski resort.
Not near Ottawa, halfway between Montreal and.
Okay. And what had happened is, so John Kelly had the idea, and I'm just skimming through the email here as we talk, and they brought my father along. Now, my father has a really strange history from video games to, he worked in the missile guidance system for NASA. He did a bunch of really crazy stuff when he was younger. And he was sitting in the car. They brought him along and they wanted to consult my father on the hardware. So Alex in our thread here in our conversation had asked a question about, he had some questions and oddities about the hardware. Unfortunately, my father's not alive, but I'm sure somebody else that is part of NABU can answer that. But what happened is that my dad was given the task of creating the very first prototypes. And that was what they were using to just show off what could be done, so they could start raising capital, attract other companies together, make things happen. So, and if you watch in some of my videos, you'll see some circuit boards and some things in the early days. And I'm probably guessing some of that actually would have been dating back to prototype stuff, which is unfortunate that I was just not in the right headspace and when he passed and I threw things out. But so my Uncle John said that's where the hardware originated from. And then from there, I think an entire division was created. Now, all this stuff, I'm going to have to scan it and have to get it online because I'm sitting here. You guys can't see it watching the video, but I have like just dozens. I have thousands of papers and news reports and everything from NABU, from all the paperwork, like all the business stuff. And in here are probably the answers that everyone's going to be looking for.
It would be nice to see them, that's for sure.
All right. So Alex had a follow-up. His main question was, why is the quality of the hardware so high? If you compare it to the quality of components and assembly to other contemporary machines, the NABU has much more expensive components.
You'd have to know my dad.
There's actually other good reasons for it too. First of all, if you notice a lot of components, like they engineered the power supply, they engineered different aspects of it. The way the cards are very, very weird, but there's a reason for it, that it actually kind of works in shipping so that they don't fall out of slots and that kind of stuff. Like when they can take a beating in shipping, and so the expansion cards works, even though they're kind of this weird wonky ribbon cable that sort of hooks it all together. So but not only that, I was told that the company that did it was that actually did the first run, which they considered pre-production ones, was Samsung. It wasn't a little known company in Korea at the time. That wasn't the behemoth it was today, and they considered it a production run for they considered it a test run, what we considered a full production run, because we only asked for 30,000 units in total. And I can't remember, it was a small amount of disk drives too. It was like 5,000 floppy drives or something like that. So there wasn't that many made. And about 20,000 in Ottawa and about 10,000 in the States. From
was it 20,000? I think it might have been less. I think it might have been more around like.
Well, the thing is, at some point I was looking at inventory because I was handling it through the database system, and we had around 15,000 floating about, and I figured that the other ones were somewhere else. That's all. So
one of the most interesting things I've gone through, like I realized going through these papers and news releases, is that there's been multiple NABU announcements and releases across Canada. So it was almost as if they had like 3 real big announcements. There's the first one in like 1982 saying NABU's live, and then all of a sudden I read an article in 1983 saying NABU's live, and it was just like they just kept releasing the same NABU's live, hoping to build enough attention for it, I guess, enough customer base. And that never seemed to happen, did it?
Yeah. See, the thing is, as I said, everything from my point of view, it looked like everything. It looked like there was engineers knew that what they were doing, but everybody else was doing stuff like making up as we go along. They hired us as video game experts because we were kids, because kids play video games. That's exactly the reason we were hired, and the only reason that we were hired specifically is because we wrote software. We wrote programs in BASIC to teach kids how to write in BASIC, and we thought that that's what they wanted. We thought that we were publishing our software through NABU, and in fact they weren't interested at all in it. And in fact, it would have been nice to do our lessons, because in fact our BASIC was really lacking in both manual and documentation and so on, and it could have used that. So but if you notice, we had a huge educational bent. Like those half the games are educational because we had deployed many of the NABUs in schools, and the Ottawa Board of Education was excited about it. Everybody was excited about it at the time. So, and it was because it was easy to do. It was like literally they didn't have to deal with floppies. Think of how the mindset at that point, they're dealing with Commodore PETs, and we had this thing called Muppets, so they can, but like everybody had to share one floppy drive. With the NABU, it didn't matter. All the stuff, everybody in the whole classroom could load it at once, and it was just to get a cable connection in there. That's all they needed, and every school had one of those. So that worked
save.
What's that?
They couldn't save.
That's right. Typically what happened is that they would have 1 or 2 units that were floppy units, and the people that wanted to do floppy things would do stuff on those floppy things and carry around their floppy with them. They would just, the kids had them just like as they were carrying notes around. So, and that it did happen though. And they used the same way to use the printer too, by the way.
Here's an interesting one. So I think you'll be able to recognize this a little bit. I don't know if you see that.
Eric Antela.
This is 1984. So this was the company structure of heads of departments by 1984. And at this point, my father, so Ron Sure is here, he was put in the operations center. So what had happened at this point is the company was having issues trying to figure out what to do with all the original hardware guys and all the original designers, right? So they were thrown in all these really weird departments. So do you recognize any of those names?
Yeah, I recognize Tony Walker and Indy Singh, and well, your name is the A Dupont is Ada Dupont. B is Barry Ellis. I had was it Lori Jackson? Let's change her name. It was somebody else afterwards. But the secretary, I don't know, the Jay Workus, I don't recognize that name. But I remember Indy Singh. He ended up being the engineer that worked on most of the iOS, running the iOS group. So he had 3 or 4 other developers under him just doing the operating system.
I keep looking through these to try to see your name someplace, but
I'm not in that there. Yeah. That's a different era. That's an era when I was a nobody. I was a high school part-time dude.
But you were 1984. You were there. Is that right?
But 1984, I was been there a couple of years. But yes, that still wasn't engineering. You're looking at from an engineer facet, and engineering lost control of the games department at one point. Eric Antela was running it, but I'm not exactly sure. But I think
here's Eric Antela's name there.
Exactly.
He's the one who would have sent this off.
Yeah, but he was the engineering guy, and he ran our company and that kind of stuff. He ran our division from my point of view. And then something happened where marketing got bigger, and then at some point marketing demanded that they own the game department.
So I don't want to take over. I got more questions, but I really want to show this because I think this is really neat. And I'm going to scan this right away for everyone. The whole internet's going to want to see this. This is the Consumer Electronics Show, CES 1984. It is the post write-up over what every company was doing and presenting. So what you'll see here is Atari was presenting, IBM was presenting, Apple was just releasing the Macintosh. This is the view of this is Paul Lancaster.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I remember he was there.
So
I was there for that one. I was there for that.
Yeah, this was the one. So he would have been there with, and then what happened is, so Paul Lancaster was asked, according to what I can read in this document, you'll read it all too, he was asked to summarize the show and the competition. And he went through and actually wrote up what he thought of Atari versus NABU, what he thought of IBM versus NABU, what he thought of Commodore 64 versus NABU. And at the end, there's suggestions of what he thinks NABU can do to compete with those products. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be a fun read for everybody.
I'm sure it will be a fun read for me.
And there's just talk about MSX just coming out. It says Activision are now converting their top titles to MSX.
Yeah. That was a show. That's where we collected a lot of our MSX titles, because a lot of wheeling and dealing went on there. They saw the NABU titles and they were interested. People were interested in the educational stuff, and we were interested. We got a lot of the MSX titles, like all the different Konami and the Namco ones had already happened. But since Namco was on board, it was easy to get Konami on board, and so on and so on and so on. So it became a list of dominoes. And in fact, there was no reason we couldn't do everything. My favorite was meeting the Zork guys, Joel Perez and Mark Blank. And Mark Blank, Mark Blank was working on Zork right beside me, and because there's the system beside mine, I was really lucky to have a cubicle right at the end, and there was an in-circuit emulator right beside like everybody could use the cubicle beside mine because it was the one with the in-circuit emulator, which was very handy. So that's where when he was with us, that's when he worked on, because it made it easy for him to debug Zork for the NABU. And it happened literally within a week, the port to NABU, like from when he arrived to when he disappeared. That was about a week. So it worked out pretty well for us. But remember, there was already a CPM version, so it wasn't that hard. It was just that we had this weird system where we were loading it over the cable and then saving it to the floppy and that kind of stuff. So it just made it a little bit interesting, and he was the one that worked on it. So it was neat.
All right, thank you. That was good. I do like these side like tangents. It makes things more interesting and fun. This is really good. So I have a question. I think it might be kind of I don't know. It seems kind of funny. Someone says, "Are there any plans for Pac-Man meets the Death Star?"
Yeah, I made a joke about that because that was after years and years ago. I said that we after when I saw people were doing crossovers. So the first one was a friend of mine worked on a game called Star Wars Monopoly, which was done by a contractor to NABU called Artec at the time for Hasbro. And when he did that, I said, this game is so stupid, right? I said, Star Wars Monopoly, this is the two stupidest things. And it was like the biggest seller of the season in like 1995. And I said, oh, we should have done that at NABU. We could have taken any one of the shoot 'em ups and do Star Wars branding on them and that kind of stuff. It would have been really, really good. It would have been easy, Star Wars Death. So there's a couple, we have lots of shoot 'em ups like Demotrons and Laser Attack and Galaxian. And even like things like Grog or theoretically can be considered as shoot 'em up, and Zot as well. So I thought that any one of those, any shoot 'em up, can be changed to TIE fighters and X-wings and that kind of stuff, and then we could be doing that. But that idea happened long after. That happened like 10, 15 years after I was at NABU with that. But at NABU, what I did, my big regret though, and I was trying to push it with John Kelly, was to literally do more work with licensing our own software. If we would have done that at the time, I felt that at the time we could have gotten some operational funds. A few of the games were spectacular, and there was no comparison to them. Like, as I mentioned, Manager's Baseball, but all the conversions that we did for everybody else, we had a system of doing that. We could have put that into operation. We could have made money at the tail end of the MSX era. But as I said, what I was interested in is that I said, we got to change, because we had adapters. I had adapters on my desk that actually when I left John Short had them on his desk, and it became mine. And it was my favorite was there was an FM adapter, a little split the size this big, and we could receive the software over FM, and it was at the dirty end of the range too. It was like literally at the end, somewhere where VHF was or something like that, and but it worked. And I thought, this is the future. The cable companies cannot keep us under their thumb any longer. This is perfect. This is software distribution the way it should have been, over the airwaves. And unfortunately, NABU itself, as the content generator, didn't. The company International Data Casting, which took the NABU technology, ran with it in that sense. They turned it into a satellite distribution method for maps and radio networks, getting their programs and that kind of stuff in a digital manner. I don't know what they're doing exactly now, but I would imagine it's the same kind of stuff. And that's the big regret. We had the ability to sort of move laterally, and if I had more people and I had more money, I knew we could have done it. It's just that we were running out of gas at the time. Even I was running out of gas. Everybody was running out of gas. So just ended up, it ended up that way because everybody was done. I think even John Kelly was done. He was thinking of other things at the time already, I think, because we saw there was no path to success. We were just losing more and more money, and he was paying for it. Like,
And
I know he was paying for it of his own. That's why one of the reasons I left early before it completely died.
and
I
it's
didn't want
sad
to pay myself.
to compliment what you're saying is because out of all the newspaper clippings that my father had kept, they're all like this.
Yeah.
Right. They're all just seeking $10 million for layoffs. They're just all depressing, and it's 2 years of depressing, and then 2 years prior to that of, we just raised $25 million, we just raised $50 million, and you can see how quickly the company grew. How many employees do you think were there, Leo?
There was I do know the number. It was around 800. And that included there's people in Almont making the adapters, or designing and building some components of the adapters. We all moved to the Baxter Center, so most people were in the Baxter Center, but those people in manufacturing, and there was people out, of course, salesmen out in the field. The computer innovations distributing was doing their thing and selling NABUs and that kind of stuff. They were brought in to do that. That was Mike Doyle's company that was brought in out of all the founders. But yeah, so they were, so some people weren't there, but it was at the time it was about 800 people. That was peak.
And then it split into two companies. Is that right? It split into NABU.
Yes, when NABU died the first time, which was October '84, we at that point, International Data Casting got all of the technology and that kind of stuff, and we became just a content generation company and the delivery of thereof. So and we continued with that to try to keep on pushing it. And a lot of the reason is because we really felt that the educational angle was going to be a good one. Like, we still had a huge deployment in schools. Several hundred NABUs were in the schools at the time, like in grade schools. And we thought that it was a good path, and it just didn't end up to be that good a path. We couldn't sustain it, and we couldn't sustain the numbers. We couldn't sustain salaries and that kind of stuff.
What you're saying actually is reflected in a lot of these articles, because they all mention and feature logo and children. And you'll notice, like, even this one here, this logo, everything is logo.
Yeah.
So they really tried to cater to educating children. And a lot of articles are about putting these computers in schools. And I think, because in Ontario, anyone outside of Ontario doesn't know that Ontario started their own computer system called the Icon.
Which I also worked on.
Did you? Okay, well, that pushed everyone out of the Ontario school system, including Commodore 64s and Apples. It pushed them all out and replaced them with this computer that I remember, but not many other people do. And I didn't learn much from it.
I wrote a game for that one called Tour of the Universe. It was a big application. So it was, and it was that one was all programmed by me. It was just, the content was made by other people, but I designed it so that teachers could add their own content and so on. But that was actually when I left NABU. That was what I was doing. Somebody called me up and said, "Hey, you want to make another game?" And I really felt like making a brand new game on a brand new system and that kind of stuff. And that's what.
Do you have one of those in your basement too?
Burroughs Icon? Are you kidding? No. I didn't keep that guy. That guy was like $10,000 and was horrible. It was a Data 186.
I think
It had a trackball though, so if you want to play Missile Command, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I did have Santo. I think he says he has one in his.
Oh, well,
collection.
there you go.
Yeah.
It has a weird file server called a lexicon. So
Was that QNX as well?
it was Kunix, yeah.
Yeah.
Kunix one, yeah. Another Canadian operating system. Although it became BlackBerry now.
All right, I have another question. Did anyone ever consider more leading edge graphics than the TMS 9918A or a more advanced CPU than the Z80 for the NABU?
That's what there was at the time.
But let me add to that.
Yeah.
At the time, one of my favorite guys, by the way, and you hear about this guy in history, is a dude named Keinichi. And he's the guy, he's considered the father of MSX. He's the one that roped Bill Gates into doing MSX in Japan. And my boss, John Short, met Bill Gates and Keinichi, but Keinichi I met several times. It's when even when NABU was in our NABU by the hair phase, Keinichi was still talking to John Kelly and still excited because it was still running a site in Osaka, Japan. So, and that had a completely different NABU that was black with Japanese keyboards. It was really weird.
Remember those?
But he came back and he showed me a video, me and John Kelly and a bunch of other people. He showed us a video of the AVDP it was called the AVDP, and this became the 9928 or something, the one that the F18 makes. But it had bit blitting in it, so it could move windows around. It had bitmap graphics and that kind of stuff, and that would have been the new NABU processor if we were going to stay with the Z80, the Z80 for us, because as I said, we weren't too concerned with making the NABU PC get any better when we knew that there was a whole pile of other computers and we could distribute to them as well. We had a distribution system that was unique. So we had a C64 adapter that was that little tiny thing, and it worked perfectly with the cable. And as you can see, some of the stuff that I recovered makes reference to the C64 titles. And there was an IBM titles as well. There's an IBM menu complete. So it was IBM PC stuff. There was Commodore 64 stuff. There was but because it was like an RS-422 interface, anybody could connect to it. So I was looking at thinking of not just using NABU, because remember, I went to CES. I saw the Amiga before it was released, right? So it's like, this is the guy that I want to be the NABU PC, not the NABU PC as it is, but this is should have been the next NABU PC was the Amiga. And if it was, I can imagine that the world would be a heck of a lot different than it was, because the Amiga at the time was absolutely the most advanced PC that I'd ever seen a demo of. And I was happy to I signed it in a non-disclosure agreement. And I was with Chris Wallace. And I remember I had this really restrictive non-disclosure agreement. I'm trying to read it. And he says, you don't have to read it. He says, he writes at the top, second born only. You can't have my firstborn. He signs it at the bottom. So and I said, like, okay. And I signed it. And that's when I got to see the Amiga. And I thought that was really, really neat. Also, the Mac came out around that time as well, but that was less interesting. It was really weird. And that's CES. I also met Steve Jobs. It was kind of neat. So I was like, oh, nice to see you, as well as some other people.
Funny story is after NABU, my family started Ottawa, Canada, and Steve Jobs and Wozniak used to frequent the place. And I remember being there a few times, and I remember vaguely never Steve Jobs. I don't know if he was not a kids person.
No, I don't think so.
No,
it's pretty serious when I met him. So
yeah, it was mostly my uncle Howard. He was really big into Apple. I think he ran it for quite a while. I just found a 1983. There was huge layoffs on the hardware division, and this is my father reapplying for a job in a different department, and he had listed all of his accomplishments on the hardware side. And it turns out that he actually created the NABU adapter, the original NABU adapter, created the prototype for it. He's also the designer for the NPC and the NA, which is the network adapter. And what is an HEDT?
Head end.
Okay, so he created the original head end as well.
Head end data transfer or something like that.
Yeah. Is that ever crazy? So these would have all been prototype stuff, but he also did, it says here he was, where was it? Something about satellite. Oh, engineering and development of the satellite transmission. Did you guys do satellite work as well?
No, but that was what international data casting became. So that the seeds to that became international data casting. But as I said, the transmission didn't really matter. It just went really fast at 6.3 megabits per second, right? So we didn't care. It could have been satellite. It could have been something else.
This is weird stuff to go through. Crazy.
All right, so Alex just wanted to comment that the keyboard was so good, the NABU would have been a great choice for text adventures.
It was. It was. We played them. We actually had our own because we had Zork on it, but we also, all of us were playing all the Zork games. That was the reason we asked Infocom to join us. We play, and on the NABU, I personally finished Planet Fall on an NPC. I actually, when I bought them, they were on 8-inch floppies, and I had to transfer to the 5 1/4 floppies. So when I bought the games, they came on CPM on 8-inch floppies. Starcross was another one. I don't know. Yeah, we finished that one too. Zork was funny because we got everything but the last point, and that was the platinum bar, the thing that goes bar at the end, and took us forever to figure that out. But we played them. It was weird because we would play other people's saves and that kind of stuff. So it was when we're playing Enchanter and that kind of stuff, somebody would go to the PC where that was, and they would start playing and continue on from somewhere else's and that kind of stuff. And then you hear somebody yell out, "Did you find this thing?" That kind of stuff. And so yeah, we were big fans of the Infocom adventures, and it was great for text adventures. But we played on a terminal. We didn't play on the NABU with its 40 column stuff. We had terminals, so we didn't care. It would look good on us on our terminals. Did we lose Jeff? Oh,
So yeah, I'm still here. So yeah, so it sounds like it's almost like LAN games, like of modern usage. So it was in a vintage way where you're yelling across the room instead of through microphones or something like that.
Well, when we were done the last year, I was working with Todd McNaughton, John Short, and Les Perley and that kind of stuff. We were playing online games at the time. I'd started playing on CompuServe. I started playing Mega Wars, which was a lot of fun. And I was seeing that was what the adventure was. And in fact, NABU, as DJ will tell you, it was designed supposed to be two-way. It was supposed to be two-way, except that the cable companies suck. They don't want to invest anything in technology, so we can only go one way, and we don't feel like basing. So if we're going to do this, then so really all we got was a broadcast channel. So we designed our whole system and around it, and that worked out actually pretty good because it looked like you had a local hard drive on your machine for the most part. You just couldn't write stuff, and if you wanted to, you'd get a floppy. The floppies didn't sell that much, just the hardcore people that like to play Zork. There was a few people that like to do some business applications, but for the most part, the floppies were used for as adjuncts to the educational software. So people that were doing logo and that kind of stuff in schools, so they had a couple of machines that had floppies, and the students would use them.
And you couldn't install your own floppy.
Yeah,
you could not install your own. You had to return your computer.
Yes, the whole computer. If you wanted a floppy drive, if you said I want a floppy drive, the whole computer went back, and you got one with a floppy card in it and a floppy drive. So that's how it was marketed. It was trying to keep the technicians down to a minimum.
So it was kind of my first, I had heard about the sales of the NABU a while ago, and I was like, I didn't know anything about it. But at our last holiday party back in December, one of our members brought one, and he jury-rigged a image writer to connect to it. I believe it was the Apple Image Writer to connect to it. So then he could print out like the basic code, because they were trying to figure out the basic language, because as you know, in the vintage computer days, there were so many dialects of BASIC, and they were trying to figure out the capabilities of it. But those are two things. Number one was like the basic language. Did you program that, or do you know who?
No, I didn't have anything to do with BASIC, thankfully. The reason why is because I saw what was done with BASIC. I think it's Nevada BASIC that somebody got a copy of the code for, that they added sprite capability and that kind of stuff, but they didn't document it very well, and that makes it a problem. I don't know of any. There is a BASIC manual in the York University Museum, I understand. So if we get a copy of that popped out on the internet, that would be great. I do know, as far as logo goes, for instance, that one is in the Ottawa Public Library has one. If somebody, but they won't release it. You have to go in there and take pictures of it or something if you want to take a look at it. But no, the basic stuff I didn't really do, and I didn't consider their BASIC that good. I used Microsoft BASIC at the time if I was going to do it on the MPC, because I had CPM available. So I didn't use that particular BASIC, and I don't have the manual for it, sadly. But I mean, it works, so it's there. I prefer other ones as well, though. Like, use a different BASIC than that one. I personally really wanted. I was talking to Kei Nishi about it too. I said we could really use MSX BASIC. because in fact, that one is well documented, right? But that one was that would have been much more of a licensing nightmare because Microsoft would have been involved, and they already hated us, I think. I don't think that they. I think I think what Bill Gates told John Short was and I'm not. It was something that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard about the cable. So, but I understand he said that with many ideas.
Oh, well, yes, like 640K is enough for anyone.
Yeah, stuff like that. So, but yeah, but my understanding was he wasn't exactly keen on it, but I wasn't there, so I have no idea. It was just my boss's impressions and so on.
Wasn't it 10 years later? Microsoft really was it MSN, the cable company? Didn't Microsoft buy a computer company in like 1995, a cable company?
I don't.
You guys remember that? It was called MNSB or
MSNBC. That's still around. I mean, that's not a cable company. That's just a news station.
Okay, there was one. Maybe someone can write in the comments. There was a Microsoft actually had a cable company in like when the internet first came out. Like in like
that's probably why he said it's the stupidest idea.
Yeah, like so 10 years later, he started. Yeah, he funded a cable company.
But yeah, it could have been a lot better if it was two-way to begin with, if the cable companies invested more and that kind of stuff. And Tom Wheeler, of course, you're going to see that his notes and so on. He had some very, very pointed words about how he felt about how the cable companies were acting, essentially. But the thing is that's no different today with people, whether it's Google and YouTube and or whether it's Twitter now. People are are letting themselves become gatekeepers when we have this wonderful internet and nobody has to do that. So
it's MSNBC. You're right.
Yeah, but it became a news station afterwards.
That's right. Yeah. So it's funny that he would have said at one time, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard," and then 10 years later.
Yeah, well, but yeah. So John Short bet him and so on, but as I said, I don't think his interest in MSX was that great, but I really wanted to get MSX Basic because I thought it was good, and I have one of those MSX machines which I showed you. I have the prototype one, and I use that comparison. I show people the Pac-Man because I actually have the Pac-Man cartridge too, and I say this is what I had. They could have had it because I did my Pac-Man before the MSX version came out, long before, almost a year before. So but main difference was mine was huge. It was 37K, and people were making cartridges going, "Ooh, 37K, we want to make it 16K." And I could have made it that way, but when you have the room and you have the resources, you use it. This is what I told everybody. I said, if I have 64K, I'm going to use every last byte, right? And I'm going to make it do magic with every last byte. So telling me that I need to fit in 16K when I didn't need to was one of those dumb things. You needed to make it more elegant. Yes, I will eventually, but I got other software to write in the meantime.
You have a real MSX prototype at home, don't you? Do you have a picture?
Yes, I do. I have that, and that was the one that Kanishi gave to John Short to bring back to NABU, and I had it on my desk for eons, and I took it home to show somebody, and it never made it back, and that kind of stuff. So it ended up in my hands, but and it's been sitting in my basement for eons. So I'd like to pull that out, but mostly I kept it because it had the Pac-Man cartridge, and it was literally the comparison. I used it as the gold standard to compare it to. And I really liked the MSX Pac-Man, by the way. It was pretty good, but I thought that they could have gone the extra mile with it. But they wanted to make a smaller cartridge.
We can call MSX NABU clones because NABU came first.
Yeah, there's argument about that. I don't know what the story is exactly. I say that I was there and I saw MSX after. I'm told other stories that they were inspired. Some engineers were inspired by MSX. I have no idea what the actual story is.
My CES documentation here says that MSX was just being released in 1984. Yeah. So is that right? Was it MSX before 1984?
Don't know.
I don't know. Does anyone here in the chat know?
I don't know.
I'd have to
people we have in chat anyway.
Alex has a question. Have you heard of, or what do you think of FujiNet?
FujiNet.
You know what FujiNet is?
No.
So FujiNet is a cartridge that you plug into vintage computers, and it has a wireless signal that you can go to a local Wi-Fi router, and you can download software directly to your computer and play it. play it or run software. So it's been around for about 3 or 4 years. It's very, they started out with, there was like an Atari version and there's an Atom version, and they're working on the Commodore 64 and Apple version. So that's basically what it is you like, for example, the Atari version, you plug it in, it connects to the Wi-Fi, you download a program, you have connect to different servers and things like that. So I guess, what are your thoughts about NABU having a FujiNet cartridge in it?
I got to take a look at it. So this is, it
Okay.
sounds similar. I haven't looked at it
Yeah.
myself. I know zero about it. So I just saw the link there. So I'll click on it and take a peek at it to see if it's similar like NABU, and if there's anything that I don't know, can we use it for something? I'm not exactly sure how it compares. Like as far as NABU is, what it was at the time, it solved a tremendously good problem in the sense that it made software download really, really fast. People were still struggling with 1200 baud modems, and I think 2400 baud had just been introduced. So, I mean, getting 6.3 megabits per second downstream was pretty good. And if we could do it even a slower speed upstream asynchronously, that's one of the reasons I was playing with the RS-232 cards. I had a modem, and I thought that we could make a multiplayer game without the cable companies involved, where we could have multiple players. So one of the ones that I had up on the board was doing a dodgeball game that you could play over 2 NABUs if they could play it over the phone with modems in them. Just as a proof of concept at the time. I never ended up doing it, but then I got more interested in doing things like MUDs and that kind of stuff, because MUDs were starting to come out, and I thought that doing a multi-user game that's like Zork would be pretty damn good. And I was working on one at the time. I ended up buying the code for it. That's another project. I was telling DJ, I said, that's another project I have in my basement. I have the Scepter of Goth code, which is one of the first MUDs ever, because we bought it and we modified it and that kind of stuff. So
that'll be a winter project, fall
that'll
project.
be interface it to the NABU project. Yes.
Yeah, we're doing it.
So by the way, MSX was released in October 1983. October 1983.
True, but it wasn't actually, there was nobody actually buying it or doing anything with it.
Oh, well, that's possible too.
They might have released a spec then. I have somewhere in a box, I have the entire MSX BIOS printed. Why I still have that, I have no idea, but I have it somewhere buried. And I have a lot of stuff still buried, and I should get to it. And you mentioned at one point, it says the archiving of the 192 floppies earlier, and okay, so I did 25 of them, and I read them with grease weasels, so now I have sound files on them. But and I've had other people look at them, when you work with them with CPM tools, it comes out as gobbledygook. So I've had discussions with people about whether it's the DPT, the disk parameter table, and that kind of stuff, and what is going on. But what I've actually said is that, well, what I'm going to do is grease weasel all the floppies so that I have a sound representation of them. And then I'm going to use AnaDisk and 22disk, which is what I originally did to get the source code off 10 years ago. It's just that I didn't have a machine to do that. And I would have preferred to get everything in without, like, I might only have one shot at those floppies in some cases. When I do it, it might tear off all of the oxide for all I know. I don't know, and that's what I'm kind of worried about. So that's why I want to do that first, so that I can try to recreate a floppy if I can. But there's a couple of disks. There's a whole pile of games, probably about at least 10% of the cycle, that I can see the packet files for, but they come out as gobbledygook. Things like ATC, which is the air traffic controller game, the Astrolander game, NABU Tennis, which is a 3D tennis, so there's Tank Commander and a whole pile of other ones. They were all good games and all stuff that would be nice to recover, just because they're just other games. I noticed that other people are making MSX games from other system and moving them to the NABU, but my interest is getting what we had on the NABU. And as I said, I'd really like to get Manager's Baseball, because it was really a shining star and it really showcased what we could do. Like, every year that we put it out, we put up a new roster of players, and they were like major league stars. So we just update the database, and boom. So you're playing Manager's Baseball 1984, 1985, 1986. And we were doing that. So it's kind of neat.
All right. Someone says, could NABU have been Canada's America Online?
It could have been. We didn't do 2A at the time, but as I said, and we were doing more educational stuff, so we had a nice foothold content wise. It's just that it was a victim of their major investor at the time was Robert Campo, and his companies exploded. He was a major real estate, almost all of Ottawa downtown has his fingerprints all over it, and much of Hull as well, the Gatineau, which is just over the river, the Quebec side. And unfortunately, there was all kinds of weird stuff that went down. But NABU was one of his investments, and when everything collapsed, NABU was one of the first ones to go. So those newspaper articles that DJ was showing was literally like emergency money. We need like just 10 million to get to the end of the year kind of stuff. We're already operating. We have a product out there. We're delivering. And it's out, it's there. And it's like all of a sudden everybody was going, oh, this computer stuff is now suddenly a horrible market. And it was just at the time when computer games were just about to launch into their next console revolution, and everybody sort of forgot about that. I guess they got tired of it and that kind of stuff. But I banged the drum a lot. As I said, I stayed in the video game industry long after NABU, long after was made sense actually. But I saw that at some point I decided it was much easier to make money doing boring things. That was
Leo,
yes.
can you speak on about anything, or do you remember when at NABU you guys tried to unionize?
I don't remember who tried to unionize. I didn't try to unionize because
No,
we
it
were
might not have been-
part-time. But I don't remember anything about any union activity. So if anything happened with
Okay.
unions, I didn't see it.
So which is interesting, I just found another article here about it. So when I was going through these, there was right at the time it was ending, and remember Campo Corporation?
Campo, Robert Campo, that's the guy I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. So Campo, there's a lot of references to Campo as the major investor, and then not putting more money in. But right at the time it was starting to go away for the last year. Do you know what's happening with Amazon right now, where they're saying how to spot somebody if they're talking union? Like if people are gathering that normally don't gather, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have a paper that went around to the company that was so similar to that, saying, and then there's also a paper I have from the union representative sending a message to John Kelly and a few other people as well. I think it might have been Elliot. And it said, we are going to be picketing at NABU on this day.
Cool.
Do you remember any of that?
No. I mean, that made it, from our point of view, it would have made no sense. But first, we're part-time. We're making hardly anything.
And
we were making less than 20,000. And the thing is that, and the other part is that we couldn't even conceptualize how we could work under a union, because a union creates all kinds of rules for us and that kind of stuff. And we were working literally 24 hours a day. We were there half the time. Some people were sleeping there sometimes and that kind of stuff. So, and we were using the facilities as our own community center and our own stuff. I was taking showers there sometimes. We had a shower there. So it was like, it wouldn't have worked. The way that we developed the product wouldn't have worked in our stuff. Now, maybe for the manufacturing and so on, but we didn't even manufacture onshore for the most part. Once the prototypes were made, that went offshore right away. So I don't know how a union would have helped that much. And I don't think anybody was even thinking about that. I don't think, because like NABU did all kinds of good things to their employees. Like we did, first of all, they didn't give us crap for doing stuff. As I said, we had a lot of students that were partying half the time when we were working. The music was loud and that kind of stuff. Not during the day, but at night it was. So it would have been weird to put the screws on us. 2A table. Yeah, it's a threat to privacy. Yes.
Isn't that interesting? This is what year is this? This is 1983. So 1983, there was already a concern of two-way cable. Do you think that might have been one of the reasons why the cable companies also were pushing back, because they're worried about privacy?
No, I think they were just cheap.
Yeah, because nowadays you have these smart TVs, which could be really eavesdropping on you, and
they are eavesdropping on you.
Especially
you don't get that cheap for nothing.
Isn't there that $50 TV or something you can get, a free TV, and it's got a camera and it has a screen underneath and it shows you commercials all day, but the TV's free?
Oh, so speaking of commercials, when I saw the NABU, I also noticed that was another innovation. That's while I think things were loading, there was like a little advertisement for buying some product or something. So you talk about a little bit about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And it was just a loading screen. We did that actually closer to the end because we had lots to say, and you can see all kinds of stuff that we had. There was one that's a penny saver advertising. We had Penny Saver was a newspaper that just was literally classified ads, and they used NABU a lot for the carriers. And we had a penny saver ad where they put some of their classified ads so people could download them, and then they're just classified ads that they could look at. I don't know how long that lasted and so on, but we had other ones that were like that were information apps and things like movie reviews and like restaurant reviews and that kind of stuff. So almost like the Ottawa version of Yelp at the time. But one of the best ones that business guys figured out right away, and this would also get them a floppy, there was one application called Stock Trend Analysis, and it was really, really good. But here's the important part: we got all of our data at midnight. In other words, when we built the cycle, we put all of the stock information for daily stocks in at midnight. Nobody, unless you had a stock terminal, like one of those stock tickers, could get info on any stock before 7 a.m. when the papers came out. So people were up in the middle of the night. And sometimes it was funny because I would be up there in the middle of the night and I would get a call for support for somebody saying, like, I'm having trouble accessing the network. And I said, what are you looking for? He says, well, the stocks aren't working and stuff like that. And I go, oh, no, everything's fine. Like I said, it's probably just your cable, like, unscrew it and screw it back in and stuff like that. And but people were desperate, like they were doing their planning for 7 a.m. They wanted to be there before everybody got all the rest of the numbers and so on. So that it was interesting that was suddenly an important application, but only for like probably like 100 people, maybe 200 people. Mostly it was the games and education.
All right. So someone wanted to know what version of Basic does NABU Basic use? Does it Nevada Basic? Do you know what Basic?
I think it's Nevada.
Okay.
I've seen documentation at NABU that had Nevada on it. I remember that the source code was floating about for it at some point, so they might have just used it. As I said, I would prefer if they used another one, like Microsoft Basic and so on. And I would have really loved to get MSX Basic, and I even asked Kei Nishi at the time for it, but I don't think Microsoft was interested in licensing MSX Basic to us. But that would have been literally the best Basic to get at the time, because it was the most complete version of it, and it did all kinds of other magical things that we did, like it did things like bank switching and so on. So there was stuff that we could have used in that in our own software that we saw, and that's I would have loved to be able to license that. But NABU was already on the ropes at that point. There wasn't a chance that we were going to be able to pay for any licensing for any new product. So we either had to build it or use something that was already around.
Could you Basic? Can you save the floppies? The Basic?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You can definitely save the floppies, and you can load the floppies.
Oh,
and actually, it works even with DJ stuff, the cloud CPM stuff. I think it loads and saves directly from.
It doesn't.
Oh, bummer.
Okay. It doesn't. So how NABU software works is the BIOS for CPM sits at the very top, right? Your BIOS, but then underneath the BIOS is another library called the iOS, which Leo referred to. So there was a conversation thread on the forum, NABU forum, asking, can we compile games for CPM? Right, run them in cloud CPM rather than running them through the NABU CPM. And the answer is no, because the actual NABU CPM has this chunk of code, which is all of your API and to access hardware. So things like windowing, talking to the graphics screen, talking to hardware like the disk drive, all that kind of stuff. So I looked into actually making cloud CPM have that chunk underneath it, which will talk to the internet adapter instead of using a floppy drive. I don't know. I got so many things going on. Yeah, but it's neat. It is a really neat idea, because when you look at MSX, MSX has, or most other computers like C64 and stuff, they have a ROM, and that ROM has helper functions built into it. So when you're running a program, you're talking to these helper functions in the ROM. That's why Lewis, who did the MSX BIOS port, that's how he was able to make that work in cloud CPM.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fun. We haven't heard from Brian lately. Is he still here?
Brian is here. So Brian, do you want to chime in on anything? You've been quiet, but I don't know if you had anything to say so far.
I'd like to hear a little bit about the emulator besides what I saw in the thing. Are you still there?
Yeah, hold on. Let me see. He's there. All right, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the emulator?
I mean, yeah, I just basically
oops. Yeah, sorry. There we go.
There
Yeah,
you
I
go.
mean, unlike the other two, I hadn't actually even heard of the NABUs till last November. But I decided I've previously worked in the MAME emulator for another system that I own, which is an Epson QX10.
Oh
So
yeah, those guys.
yeah. So I had improved that and fixed some bugs related to that. So I was familiar with the framework and just decided that while I was waiting for my NABU to ship, I was sort of bored and decided to actually try writing a complete core from scratch instead of updating an existing core.
And quickly, like within a week.
Yes. It took about a week or whatever to get like the main system running. Yeah.
I just remember I just got RetroNet chat working and you joined and it was just, I should have screenshotted that very first one. You were just like exclamation marks. It's, I think you might have swore, I don't know. You're just like, it's working.
Yep.
Like
Yeah,
the first
no,
time.
it took like maybe a week and a half, something like that to get the main stuff running. The latest thing I've done is to actually add fully emulated keyboard support, because until recently we were using a high level keyboard emulation that just emulated sending the correct serial data over the emulated serial port.
That Leo, that might fix your Easter egg issue with
Yeah, maybe it is.
49er.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe. But I gotta say, like that's the one I use right now because I have a lot of NABUs. I have a total of 7 and I have a total of 4 keyboards. 2 of the keyboards are missing a key, but all of them are weird in various different ways. As I showed in one of the videos, they have all different ROMs and they have all different problems. Like it's like literally a year's worth of fixing right there. And I'm like, I just got to put that aside for a moment because if I stop to do that, because I suck at hardware, I'll be there for the next year, and none of the the old games will get brought out, or any of the software, or none of the code and so on, or all the other tidbits that I have. And I'd like to get that stuff out first, so that everybody says, "I'll help you fix it. I'll help you fix. Send me them." And no, that's okay. I haven't even gotten to that. It's easier just to keep them stacked in plastic in a room, use the emulator, and then I can tape it and that kind of stuff. And then if I could find problems, then I can talk to you. And I know you wanted to see the hard drive pictures and that kind of stuff. I didn't have them all out. They were literally still in plastic, and I didn't want to rip them open to get them out. And they're still like that at the moment. But someday I'll get to that, so that I can have fun like everybody else is having fun. Because this is not fun. The floppies are really, like, I have to be really careful with them too. And I'm looking at them, making sure, do I trust the drive to take this? And what's going to happen? So I'm going to continue doing that. And I want to make sure that all of those floppies that all of the software that you can see gets out, so that everybody can enjoy that. And then hopefully then I can start having fun making new stuff and so on. And
because you're using MAME right now, right?
Right now, well, I'm using MAME right now. As I said, it's good for recording. It's good for stopping things and so on. But they've
MAME
also
every day, Brian. It saved my life for everything.
Having said that, I'm interested in trying all the toys. People have sent me some of the toys, like the I have many ROMs. So I've got the BC's ROM emulator, ROM switcher board. I also have the Microcore Labs ROM switcher, which would be really good for me specifically. And I'm interested in getting the debugger one, but I'm more interested in trying to get the NABU development environment into the state that I understand what it was in the past, because it'll be easier for me to deal with the code then. Right now I'm struggling with the code because stuff doesn't work all the time and it doesn't compile well and that kind of stuff. And that really I shouldn't be there. It's like, if I just had my development system, it would work. But I don't. So MAME right now satisfies that at the moment. I use it with Cloud CPM. I've tried it with the other CPMs, but I found that I get distracted because stuff works a little bit differently and that kind of stuff. So I have to stick with Cloud CPM for the moment, because I can move stuff back and forth in terms of the whole pile of source files and that kind of stuff. And now that you fixed the submit problem, then hopefully it'll go a little bit faster when I'm making.
Yeah, you didn't call me. This does a video and says submit doesn't work on other drives, and CPM 2.2 doesn't work on other drives. You're right. By default. So I modified the BIOS so it will.
Well, no, that's CPM 3 did. That's the thing. That's the different. And CPM 3 has a number of different things that's kind of nice. So I'd like to see. I know you don't want to do CPM 3.
Give me
you don't want to go to that.
It's
other
fishing
people
time
will.
right now.
Yeah, other people will, and I'm hoping that other people will. They'll try to take a look at CPM3 or that kind of stuff, or any other way that we can move stuff. I don't, like I can't figure out the new stuff until I'm done getting rid of that old stuff. So that's what I'd really like to do, is try to figure out some of these methods for developing this stuff a little bit better, because my interest is a little bit different. There's a lot of people that are interested, of course, and a lot of people, you've seen some of the YouTube comments where they go, how do we do this and how do we do that? And I said, I showed you in this video, but if you want to do it in another language, I'd like to show, like you, Jeff, you talked about all kinds of languages at some point, and you were wondering
Yes.
about all the different languages.
Yeah, the
And I can
programming
tell you right
language
now,
is it's source code, yeah.
languages, we have Z80 assembler. There was one in BASIC. I can't remember what it was. Our Macbeth, which is our Othello implementation, was written in Pascal. The backgammon game was written in PL1. There's a good one, comes out of nowhere, right? PL1, I mean, that's literally an IBM compiler, right? I can't remember, somebody else's compiler, but anyways, PL1, and it was and here's the funny part. So I would get the janitor duty stuff, right? And then I get its code and be like, this is a language I've never seen before. And I would have to figure it out, right? And the thing is, it wasn't that bad, because most of the languages, like PL1 is just another structured language. That's easy to work with. And it's kind of like Pascal. Pascal, I was funny because I was learning Pascal at the time. So I get Pascal code and was like, okay, this is interesting. But it was funny because I didn't know C, but when I started later on, I started working in C a lot because I had other applications. And NABU filer is when I wrote in C, and I do have the code for that, but it's mangled in spots as well. But it illustrates stuff that we did from a NABU point of view, not from a CPM point of view. So it's easier to compile that as a NABU application. I'm thinking in the headspace of NABU applications, whereas other people say, I want my CPM applications and load directly from the command line. I can't do that yet. Maybe I will at some point. But Brian, I love the emulator, and that's what I use. And that's when I ask you, I say, is there a new one available? I know, in fact, you don't have to do a new one that much, which is kind of nice. So I don't check that much.
Yeah, most of the stuff works now, as far as I know. So
yeah. So yeah, that's the thing, is as long as it just works, then right at the moment it satisfies, for me, it satisfies the archiving thing, because I can pull whole directories into the emulator without a ton of effort, because you guys know retro means working with floppies. You're like praying that it's writing correctly. And I hate hearing like a weird noise at the end of a floppy or that kind of stuff. I go, I know it's not working, and you're ruining the floppy at the same time. That's not, so I need to use something that's a bit more modern to move stuff. And that's why I like the idea. I see some of the projects are things like making a hard drive using an IDE, like a compact flash and that kind of stuff. I'm really interested in that kind of stuff, because that's the kind of stuff that they'll bring that a NABU PC's hardware closer to what I was used to. A big hard drive that I had with user areas, and I can use that to compile and use the crossover cable to test, just as it was.
Yeah, with the FujiNet, you can actually even have an SD card on there too. So that's would also help you with that.
I got to take a look at this. Maybe we should open up a thread, DJ, on the forums. So a lot of the we discuss we're doing at forums.nabu.ca, and that's because it's easier for me to do that than Discord, because Discord is like a stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Like Teams, I tell my colleagues at work, Teams is good for a chat, but if you want to talk about the whole project here, let's move it to a Confluence page or move it to email, because we can't do it here.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with that. I like you seeing stuff, and that's where we're sort of, so if we can get a thread going on that on FujiNet, I would be interested. Like, I'm interested in all the stuff in NABU. I'm just less interested and a little bit more laser focused on getting the old crap extracted from my teeth, kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's I'm sure VCF or a lot of other people can help you if you do want to get help from other people with archiving the software off a floppy disk.
Well, yeah, we should talk, because I got to get a list of names. Other people have said that they want to help, and sometimes I can reach out, but sometimes people are busy and that kind of stuff. And remember, we're all doing this for free, so it's kind of hard to do that. But I would like to do that. We should have a session sometime, where if you know of it, because in fact I am not part of the retro community so much as I fell into it.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing retro software before. I used emulators to play games, like for other areas like Clico and that kind of stuff, but I didn't do that all the time. And not only that, but NABU has a weird headspace for me that it's very difficult for me to enter sometimes. You have to remember that I literally grew up there. So when I start thinking about it, and I think about it, and I think of John Kelly, and I think that when he died and that kind of stuff, it's hard to work on stuff, and I get stuck on it because I go, oh, this so and so worked on it, but I haven't seen that guy in ages. I wonder what he's doing now and stuff like that, and it gets distracting. So, that's why I'm trying to plow through that process. It's become very slow because I have to stop. I was telling you, I don't even have a beer when I'm doing that because I get so morose when I'm looking at it. So I'd like to, but that's why that's why I like using the emulator. Brian's emulators, DJ stuff allows me to move stuff back and forth. I can do it a lot quicker than normal. So it's a good place to be. But I want to take a look at this FujiNet thing that you're gonna, so we should make a thread on it and discuss it.
Good idea. I hear it being made now by somebody. All right. So someone asked, did anyone try using 4 joysticks in an NABU PC?
Absolutely, we did.
Well, I have a game. I have a game that you can play 4-player right now. Game Man, yeah. Game 4.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mine was the multiplayer dodgeball I aforementioned that could have been played remotely, but was supposed to play with literally 4 people, a la Gauntlet kind of thing.
But that wasn't released, was it?
No. It was actually a proof of concept that was really, and it was when we had 4 joysticks. But once it was clear that we were going to only have 2, that was the end of that. Any talk of that. But anyway, it just made no sense. If you notice, a lot of the games, well, we went for 2 joysticks. We only delivered 1 with the package. Like the people had to buy the second one or get a second one. In fact, we sold them too. I think they were $20 or something like that. They were fairly reasonable, and because people also killed them. Like those joysticks took a beating. So, but
Same for Atari joysticks.
yeah, but if you notice, even in Pac-Man, in the menu when it starts, it says 1 player. It says 2-player 1 joystick is one of the options, and it says 2-player 2 joysticks. That happened afterwards. Once it was clear that people were only getting 1, and they were saying, "Well, you're not giving us 2. Why are you making 2-player games?" There's one game that's a really good 2-player game. It's one that I need to recover called Tank Commander, and it's like think of the movie Tron when they had tanks and recognizers so here's what happened. Here's the story. 1982, when we started at NABU, Tron came out at the end of the summer, and none of us were working on anything yet, really. So they got all of the new part-time game programmers and all the old guys, and they sent us all to the movie theater to see Tron. And of course, we were blown away. Arthur Ham was really inspired by it. So he made a game called Tank Commander, which was a maze game, a 3D game that was a tank game. And he had originally it was the recognizers from Tron, but we knew we'd get sued over that. So he changed them into those big horseshoe magnets. So he had to blow off the 2 legs of the horseshoe magnet, and then you could blow off the main section. But here's the interesting 2-player aspect of it. You could play with 2 players where one person drove the tank and the other person fired. The other person and that made it, when he did that, it was like, we can make a cooperative game. Wow, this is great. We should do this more, because it was a great game, and a lot of people played it severely drunk, but 2-player at the time, because it was a great game to play 2-player, and it would get harder and harder and harder. It's one of those ones that when you got really good at it, you were really proud of what you could manage. And if you had 2 people, you literally did double the amount of killing and that kind of stuff. So it was great. So there's an example of where even though we had 4 joysticks, or we just had 2 joysticks, we actually put them to use. We let people play with both of them, because otherwise it was just hand the joystick back and forth. Like literally, people were playing one game or another. So it was kind of neat that way. So there wasn't a lot of we ended up making games to have 1 joystick for the most part, because it just wasn't, joysticks were becoming less important. The keyboard was becoming more important, I think.
Wow, very cool. I like it. I like the cooperative aspect, and it's.
I got to get that game.
And I would imagine that it's very similar to how a tank is actually operated, where there's more than one person operating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, it's got to be. See, that's the thing. I can talk about them, and I was like, I can see them in my mind, and other people can see them in their mind. The people who've played NABU before, maybe even kids who have had it in the past, and but I need to get them out of there so that they can see some of these neat creative things that nobody else did. Just we did them because we were creative about it. The original NABU titles, some of them have some spectacular creativity in them. I'll give you an example. Like we have a poker game. was a simple poker game. It had, so the idea was is that we like this like the way I wrote Pac-Man is that all the ghosts have multiple personalities, and I talked about that. We talked about the poker game. I said, don't make a whole pile of players, make different personalities. Make the guy that bets the world. Make the guy that always falls for bluffs. But I also added one. I said I didn't do the game, by the way. But when I was talking to the guys that are doing Chang Chow and this guy named Paul, and I can't remember his last name, but the guy was a mathematician and so on. I said, make a cheater. Make a guy look at the cards. Make another guy that just looks at the cards. And so they would randomly get these players as the other players. And every now and again, they get the cheater that literally you couldn't beat. There was not a chance because he saw what you had, right? And people would complain. Literally, I got this fan mail, what's it with poker? I had a big stake going and stuff. Remember, they're just playing for virtual money. Like that. But emotions run high when you're losing at poker, I guess.
That's pretty funny. I like that. So why was there such an interest in making Johnny Hart games? So Johnny Hart was the creator of BC Comics, is that correct?
Yeah. So the story about that is that as after I mentioned, Michael Bate was the director of content development, and somehow that was his idea, really. And somehow he contacted Johnny Hart, or he knew him beforehand, or that kind of stuff, and he licensed the characters for use in the video games, which is actually, when you think about it at the time, it wasn't actually done that much. At the time in 1982, licensing for video games was not done. I didn't see. I saw none myself. Oh yeah, people made games like Star Wars games and that kind of stuff, but they were definitely not licensed from LucasArts in 1982 and that kind of stuff. I saw Star Wars games or your TIE Fighter game for the Apple and that kind of stuff. It was definitely that. So this was kind of new, and it did. The nice thing is that the comic strips were very familiar. BC was and Wizard of Id were two comic strips that were well known, and a whole suite of games were made around it. I myself worked on WizType. Artec made the original game, but it was a buggy mess when I got my hands on it. So I made the timing, I fixed the timing, and I made it a beautiful game. And it was a great typing tutor that made me go from having 20 words per minute to 65 by the time I was done fixing it. So it was kind of, I knew it was working, but that was Wizard of Id, and I was just firing things, lightning bolts at words to make them disappear. And that was an example. But there was also Wiley's Dictionary, which was just dictionary words done in a funny way. And what Trivial Pursuit was big at the time, huge. So that's why we had the BC trivia game. So we had, and the idea by BC trivia, because we're delivered over cable, we could change the trivia questions. We could make a new one: trivia 1, trivia 2, trivia this, trivia that, trivia Christmas, right? Trivia Easter, all that wonderful stuff. That's not what ended up turning out. But Johnny Hart came a few times. I met him a few times. We had this blackboard where we would do his stuff on it, but he drew this dinosaur and this little bug going into his mouth and so on, and said "Hart" at the bottom. So now couldn't use the blackboard anymore. We had this work of art that now we had to leave there, right? It was like it was like a Banksy kind of thing in our own department. So we had to flip the board around and use the other side and make sure that the other side was covered so nobody would touch it, because cleaners would want to clean it off, right? That kind of stuff, right? So, and we don't want anybody to touch it. But he was there a few times. And then Michael Bate went to Sydney Development Corp, which made Quest for Tires, also for NABU, but they did it originally for Coleco and that kind of stuff. So he also did the BC licensing and moved it out when he did Quest for Tires for the Coleco. And there was a lot of people from NABU that did that. The Artec, who did a lot of contracting. John Allen worked on that too, who did Alpha Blast, and I think he worked on Zot too. So there was our community was kind of weird, because eventually all the different people that were working in video games ended up working as for our other companies, doing contracts for Hasbro and that kind of stuff afterwards, as even me. But I spent a lot of time doing, like I did a game called WizCalc for World Book Encyclopedia at one point. It was one of those throwaway things, and I couldn't understand. It was an educational spreadsheet. I didn't understand it myself, but it was paid really well. So, but a lot of people were doing stuff all over the place. But Johnny Hart came a few times, and he stayed with us. We weren't allowed to party with them because they would go drinking and that kind of stuff. And we were all like underage, so we couldn't go with them and so on. But my understanding is they had a good time, a lot better time than we had. But he visited us, so we had a lot of fun when he did show up. And there was the other dude that showed up with him, the other artist. His name was Jack Caprio. Usually they travel together, and They were dog and pony show together. It was pretty good comedy when they were around.
So how do you feel about NABU coming back to life with a bang since Adrian's digital basement video?
Well, I think it's great. A lot of the NABU employees that I've talked to think it's great. I've tried this a few times. I tried it by myself in somewhere around 1999, but I was too inept to be able to do it, and I didn't have enough help to be able to do it. But I also thought the other thing is nobody is going to care. So there's that, right? In 2009, I did this again, where I did a lot of the extraction of source code and some of the stuff, a lot of the cycle applications and so on, for York University, and that was a wonderful experience. And they created an emulator, but then it became a museum piece. And I said, if I'm going to do this again, the last thing I want this to do is turn into something that's dumped in a warehouse again. So people have asked me, I'll buy your stuff off you, and I go, I'd love to say yes, because in fact I'd like the room in my house. But if I do, I know it's gone forever. And as I said, I have unique NABU PCs that nobody else has. I have prototypes and stuff like that. So I'd better keep them around for somebody to be able, that's better at it to figure it out than me. I mean,
it was really funny when the NABU stuff appeared, because I did something similar to what Leo's talking about. Is in where I am right now is near a city called Thunder Bay. I'm at my beach right now, so I come here in the summer times, and I stayed late into the winter. And I don't know if you know 8-bit Show and Tell, Robin. So he holds an event here in Thunder Bay every once a month for the retro group. And he was saying to me for a while, he's texting me, he's like, you got to bring your NABU stuff. Now, Robin used to work for my dad when he was younger, after in the video game world, when my father was owning video games and had his fingers in like Neo Geo and a few other different things. And so I was at another company, how we had met. I was on the board of a company, and I'd come in just to talk about business and my history. And I mentioned NABU, and he's like, your dad talked to me about this before. I want to see it. So he's like, well, can you come and bring some NABUs to this event? So in November, like early November, right? Like a week before James posted the stuff on eBay, I went to this event. I brought all my NABU stuff. I set it all up, and people were looking at it, and they were just like confused, because this is from 1984, yet it's here and I've never heard of it, and it's retro, and I know retro, they're thinking in their head, right? The gears are spinning. They're like, how can this exist without me knowing? Haven't all Easter eggs, haven't all discoveries been done in the vintage world? So it was just kind of like this small little explosion in everyone's mind at this event. And there's only like maybe 10 people there. So I spent the night, I was exhausted talking. I was just like talking, telling stories like I was telling, like we're doing now. And I get back to Calgary for some meetings, and I wake up, and there's a text message from Robin, and he's like, eBay now, NABU, with a link. I click on it. It's a week later. Like, it's just so ironic that all of a sudden, a week later, and all these people who are at this event, who saw this NABU, who didn't understand it, a week later they can have their hands on one. So that's why I kind of had a head start to everyone else on reverse engineering it, because I had some NABUs. I was able to pull it out. I was able to start hacking it, right? But it was like, yeah, like what Leo said, I've always been that guy at an event, or I've been that guy at a party, and I'm drinking beer and I'm telling stories about how the internet that could have been started in Canada, it's like
the old man, like,
yeah, right? Like, I used to walk up hills both ways. And so I'm going off of this my whole life. And I just felt like that cuckoo crazy guy, because if you do Google searches for NABU, like, it's hard to find stuff. It's there really isn't that much there.
Oh, so that was like my other question was, have you contributed to the Wikipedia page, and do you want to contribute more to it to make it a little bit more robust?
Can you scroll down to the bottom of the Wikipedia page? I don't want to start typing, as you guys will hear me echoing, but yes, there may be a link. I don't know if it's still there. So I want to say 98, maybe it was. I was working 98, 99. I was at Cisco Systems, and there was a group of guys that that were really big into retro computers, and I'm talking like PDPs, right? And I was, and that's when that was retro 98, right? Because I mean, you could still turn on a Commodore 64 in 98 and not get laughed at. But that was retro, but different kind of retro. That was laziness for not upgrading, right? So these guys were big into these old computers, and I was on eBay one day and I came across NABUs, and I'm like, oh shit, yeah, NABU. And I started telling the story. So I actually had a website my domain was called atomic.speculation.org, and it might still be on there on the bottom. And
I don't see Atomic.
it's gone, eh? Okay. Yeah. And the other one was called digitalcreation.net. But if you go back to the Wayback Machine, you might be able to find it. I actually had an entire webpage on atomic.speculation.org just of NABU picks. In like, I'd say probably close to 98, 99. And I was, again, similar to Leo, like trying to get the word out there, because I grew up with this thing. I mean, I grew up with my dad sitting there explaining to me, like, talking, mansplaining, dadsplaining. You could have ordered, and it's a thing, it's on our about page of the nabu.ca. It's like, you could have ordered flowers. That was this thing. Could have ordered flowers with your computer.
We did have the grocer. Actually, at some point we did have, there was a grocer that opened, I can't remember the name, that opened up in Ottawa, but they did grocery delivery. So what they did is our application had a bunch of the things that they would make available for delivery. It wasn't a full grocer. It was like milk and eggs and that kind of stuff, but it would have the prices up for you. And it was mostly designed for people that couldn't get out to do it. Yeah, you would just phone them, but you could look up the catalog on the NABU. And that was changed daily.
And so there was a modem version, right? There was a modem. There was a server that you guys had at one point, I remember as a kid, where you can actually connect your NABU to a modem, and we dial up to a server, and there was two-way for something. Do you remember anything about that?
Yes, but it's probably not what you think. There was a lot of stuff that we did using modem and that kind of stuff. But like, for instance, whenever I was dealing with one of the things like King Features stuff, like the movie reviews and so on, I would kind of connect to King Features, which via modem.
John told me, John said he's like, I remember as being a kid, and my dad was like, this is a special NABU because it's doing 2-direction talks. Remember, I was sick.
I didn't get that. we didn't see that stuff. As I said, I saw stuff at the tail end, which was I love the FM adapter, and I wish that one could be that one was just incredible. It was like 6.3 megabits per second over FM. This is incredible. And no cable company in sight. We can set up a frequency anywhere. It could be any frequency, and it could be the crappiest of frequencies. That was the best part, because it was doing lots of CRC checking and so on.
I know there was like, I used to have I forget what it was. It might have been like some sort of iPod or something like that. It would transmit like the low end of the FM frequency, like 87.7 or something like that. Yeah. So there's a certain like range underneath like what, radio stations playing music would play. So that's probably where you could have put it. It's like,
in fact, we did, and we were allowed to, because it was considered a dirty band and was considered a research band. You just had to say that you were using it. That's all you had to do, is tell the government. But they didn't license it, like you're saying, oh, that's yours only. Somebody else could use it as well. So, but it didn't matter. It was worthy to test with, and that's what they did. And I really wish that would have been pushed out, because that would have been literally the internet. It would have pre-internet for everybody, because it would be broadcasting on FM. Only needs 3,000, 6,000 watts of broadcast power to get a pretty big range.
Like Wi-Fi before we actually had Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would have been excellent. It would have been excellent. And as I said, we were experimenting with modems going 2-way, and I was experimenting with them, and I was experimenting with games at the time, and I was thinking about it. It's just that everything requires cash and time, right? The great triangle of stuff. Great ideas require time and money
and customers.
And customers.
and as my uncle said, he said we were creating a solution for a problem that nobody had.
Yep. Nobody understood that they wanted that at that point.
and then Teledon came out, right, which was heavily funded by the Canadian government. Right? Do you remember Teledon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was sad. So Canada sunk a ton of money into another company which was doing the same thing that NABU was trying to do, and NABU lost to it. It was just a political landslide. And
the big company that was Bell Canada, and they blew probably hundreds of millions of dollars on it, and they soaked me for some, because I tried to make an online game on their Teledon system. They charged me $500 a month to get about $200 worth of revenue.
So
So
is Teledon going to be maybe the next treasure that gets found? I don't know how many people.
no.
remember.
Well, you mean this is the game that I had. It was the
No, Teledon in general. I don't know how many people.
Oh no,
Teledon.
nobody gives a crap about it. To be very clear.
there's some bruises there.
It's horrible. It's a horrible protocol. It's a horrible. I've worked with it.
Yeah.
The coordinate system is 0 to 1.
Well, that sounds like
It means you have
all
infinite
3D.
slicing, right?
Right.
So it's a floating point number in an 8-bit era, that kind of stuff. It's
Well, you gotta do some video game programming now. That's
exactly. It was a pain. It really was. It wasn't going to happen on the NABU, even though you'll see lots of articles that said that NABU and Teledon were going to do that. I think that was kind of like smeared marketing where, Teledon NABU, just so that keeps it in people in mind. There was not a chance because you saw the video processor. It couldn't display Teledon graphics.
Okay, so while I have you here, I'm gonna ask you a quick question. Do you know the person Barbara Crook?
Yes, she was she was a writer for the Auto Citizen at the time.
So in this 60-minute video that I recorded, which I have to really edit, where I go through all these articles, I came across so many Barbara Crook articles, and she flip-flops on NABU. She starts off really tearing NABU apart, but at the very end, she seems to kind of feel sympathetic for it. How do you feel about Barbara Crook?
I saw the same thing at the time. I thought she was misinformed, so I didn't really, and I thought that she wasn't particularly helpful. But that doesn't matter. They had other ones later that wasn't Barbara Crook at the time. I think Alana Keynes was really like NABU and that kind of stuff. And she was another writer. But yeah, Barbara Crook was pretty hard on NABU, and I didn't really worry about what people were writing about it because it was what people were saying. Everybody who experienced the NABU that I showed, like I had one at my house, of course I did, and I would show all my friends and that kind of stuff, and we'd play games and all the different games and that kind of stuff, and I would get critiques on them and so on, and we could see where it could be improved, and it was kind of fun doing that. But as I said, it was something that was brand new to a lot of people's psyche. As you just said, it was a solution in terms of problem. People were used to cartridges and buying things, physical things to plop in their machine. The fact that something was happening kind of ethereally, like literally like Ethernet, well, it was hard to wrap your head around it for a lot of people. But we tried to position it in like an adjunct to pay TV. If you can see everything about it at the time, there's a page keys on it. If there's no scrolling in the stuff, there's page keys because that's how VCRs worked and that kind of stuff, or digital things worked. We called them titles. We didn't call them games, or we didn't call them apps. We called them titles because they were like movie titles. And we were trying to hit the same vibe as pay TV at the time, and in fact that pay TV was coming out at the same time as NABU, so it was easy to ride that coattail of interest and that kind of stuff. It's just that people weren't interested in playing games so much at the time, and people were interested in pay TV in terms of viewing movies without commercials. I think that was literally.
I'd like to also add too, I think going through all these articles in the last couple of days and absorbing everything, I feel like one of the struggles that people were having as well is that they were paying for something that they didn't own, right? They didn't have it in their hands. It wasn't tangible. You can get a Atari, you can buy a cartridge, you can bring it home, it's yours. You put it on your shelf, it's your thing. But with the subscription thing, you pay for something, and then when you stop paying, it goes away.
Yeah.
And I know in a world today, where you have subscriptions for heated seats, right? From BMW, it's, we argue and we fight over it, but it's something that we accept because it is a thing that, it's just the future, but hopefully not. But I think it was just a non-tangible thing. And this is the CES recommendations. And I'll just hold this up so you can read it while I speak, but one of the recommendations on there, it did say that the MSX and NABU was closing in. This is 1984, but you can also see that they're mentioning cartridges and other stuff is what they're suggesting. That this is the feedback from the CES show. So again, I'll scan this.
They didn't mention me there. I knew it.
What's that?
I was there. They didn't mention me in that report. I didn't.
You know what? I haven't read it word to word. So why don't I just throw it up here online on NABU or on the forum? Yeah. And I'll do it tomorrow because, like I said, I'm 8 minutes late to watch a hockey game, but I'm enjoying your stories, and this is cool. And like Brian's here, like I think that's probably I feel time, Leo, but Brian's like my hero right now because
Brian's my hero. I use the name.
Been debugger and MAME, like.
Actually, I'd like
that-
to figure out how to debug properly in MAME. So that's
Yeah,
something.
three, baby.
That's one of the things I
no.
like best about emulation is that it gives you a very easy way to debug your stuff.
Yes.
When you're working on it, which you don't have on the original hardware.
And
Yeah.
I tell you, man, MAME, the funny thing about MAME is it's TMS99 emulation will do anything. It does not care about interrupts. It does not care about your scan, where you are in the scan line. It doesn't care.
Right.
So everything I wrote at the very beginning that was graphical, because this is my first time in this world, right? So I'm writing all this stuff, with asteroids bouncing around for my first game, and it worked great on MAME. Then I throw it on the NPC, and it was just like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, which is funny, about, I don't know, like maybe 2 months ago or something, I released a video like with a slideshow, and I said, you can make your own slideshow. And I had this link to this program. Well, somebody in the community, I don't know, people were upset and being like, I don't like DJ today. So I'm going to write the author and tell him that this DJ didn't provide a link to his website. So what turned out is this guy emails me, the author, and just says, hey man, can you provide a link to the website? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I didn't know that. Right. So I did it. Turns out he lives in the same city, Calgary, with me. So we go for beers. Awesome guy, like super cool guy. So we're hanging out, and I'm telling him the story about how I'm like this Bri guy like shows up on YouTube. A week later, we got like a working version of MAME. We're modifying the internet adapter so he can connect to it. Then I do the RetroNet. Remember RetroNet back then? Like it was like 300 bucks because I didn't have the interrupts working properly.
Like I just remember you shortened the username, and I had to like cut the H out of my name in there.
Yeah. So it was like I'm giddy because it was so exciting of a time. And here I am, like, getting all these pieces together, talking to this guy, telling him this whole story. And I'm telling him about my TMS99 experiences. And he goes, have you gotten the bug where, because you can split the memory into 3? And he's like, if you have, I forgot it now. See, I had too many beers that day. But it's something crazy. Like if you have 5 sprites or 6 sprites and they're all within the same memory address but not in the same line, they'll ghost. Do you remember that at all, Leo?
I've heard of this, but nobody's ever told me the exact technique, so I don't understand how it works.
He seems to be like, I looked in all documentations after, and again, I'm gonna have to email him or send him a text and find out the exact details. He might be watching this and being like, maybe he'll comment. But what was really great is because here I am trying to program the TMS99, and I'm like, all these like asteroids are ghosting, and I couldn't figure out what's going on. So turns out, you get somebody who complains about something who you turn into a good buddy, you have some beers, and you solve a problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's what happened with this. Like when I it was funny watching DJ's first videos coming up because I was sitting there, like Machiavellian, going, oh, another guy. Let's see how far this guy goes. Oh, maybe he might be worthy. Who knows?
Do you remember your first message to me?
Yeah, I said, what happened was that I couldn't contact DJ. He had no contact information, so I didn't. So what I did was I went on LinkedIn. I said, everybody's on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn makes it really obtuse if you're not in the same network to link with something. Like Brian, I tried to link with you and I couldn't. I can't. I don't even understand why. But anyway, but you can if you go all the way to the end of the follow and that kind of stuff. And all I could say was a connection request, and all I said was the connection request was connect with me and all your NABU dreams will come true. That was it.
So at the time, I'm just doing these videos and it's creating some stir, and I'm in a whole new world for me, this whole retro world, right? So there's names of people, I guess, who know each other. And I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know there was a community. And it's great to be part of it now. But at the time, I didn't know. So all of a sudden, I'm getting these like weird messages from people that I was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. So I was kind of ignoring them. But then I get this like, all your NABU dreams will come true. And I'm like, well, it's creepy, but also intriguing. Right? Like, it's kind of got me in the right spot. So I think that night, Leo, wasn't it that night that you sent me?
Yeah, I was still at work, and I was still working on something that was going to be working late on. So it just kept on going, and we started chatting on LinkedIn. And I said, I got this, and I said, I tell you what, if you can, I'll give you this, which was the packet one, the God particle I call it, which is the main menu with the iOS built into it, which allows you to load everything. If you can load that, you can load anything, is what I said, and that's was the truth. So you went away, and I think the next day, I wasn't sure if you got it that night or the next day.
It was the same day. So we had on the phone, you sent it to me, and I was like hacking time, man. I was just like, right? Like 1984 style. Yeah. And I was trying to fix every little bit of bug I could to get this thing to load. And I think there was a gotcha. Do you remember the gotcha?
Yeah. You could get the time packet to work.
Time
Yeah.
packet.
Yeah.
And there was another one, wasn't there? Wasn't there something about the there was like an ad?
The
that was-
message. No, the message. Remember the message? The message
yes.
light.
Yes, there was a message thing that came up and we couldn't get any further.
Yeah, so let me explain the message thing for everybody is that NABU had the capability of kind of being two-way in the sense that we had this message light. So in one, we could actually, each subscriber had a PAL that described their subscriber number from the NABU adapter. But that meant that each NABU adapter was addressable. So in the cycle, we could actually we could say this specific adapter gets this specific message, and it would literally be a page of text and that kind of stuff. And it would be, the idea was to say, pay your bill or you're going to be cut off kind of stuff. And in fact, that never got implemented. But other things were like, there's going to be downtime on the cable from this time to this time, from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. on this date. Nobody theoretically should be playing, but they were told, like, you can't use it from that. We're not going to, you can't play any games and that kind of stuff. That's the one drag that people would find out is when the cable was out. So we're all of their entertainment as well, just like in a TV. But yes, it was the message packet. So it was your software was getting hung up over the getting of the message because it thought that it was supposed to receive a message, and it couldn't. And in fact, the problem was the message packet was mangled. It was one of the ones that was mangled out of all of them, so it kept on causing the PC to hang. And I said, just ignore the message and you'll be cool.
I don't recall we got around to it. I know that everybody kind of figured it out, and it was a really fun time for me because first off, being able to see this thing load up, right? Like all the little pieces of assembler I was doing, trying to figure out the starting address, the original address that when the memory was being loaded in from the adapter. Like there were so many little things. But then I think when Leo sent the main menu and I stopped it and I grabbed my phone and recorded it so everyone can see the same time as I saw it, because I did that. Like I didn't watch it and then like say, oh, I'm going to record now later. I actually was like, no, we're going to do this together. And that was like the best. I was like such the best feeling ever. And then I also didn't want to release everything. I kept saying, I kind of maybe release it, but I didn't want to. I wanted other people to experience what I was going through. Like York gave me some information. And what's the guy's name from York?
Zbigniew Stachniak.
Yeah, so I messaged him. I was like the first I messaged him, I think, because he hadn't heard about the NABUs for sale on eBay yet. And I said, look, I want to do this thing. He treated me like a student. He gave me tasks. He was like, if you can do this, I will give you something. Right. So I really should publish this email thread because they were simple stuff like if you can make the NABU prompt for a channel. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? He's like, well, if you can look through the code, you'll figure it out. So, I look into the code. Santo already had the code, the ROM converted to assembler. And then I found another website where somebody actually had annotated everything. So I was like, well, this is super great. So there was this community coming together already. So I was able to go through it and I figured out how to ask for a channel. I did a video on that. And then I think eventually he sent me this document, which is floating around where it shows the communication. And there was some missing stuff and some stuff that kind of worked, stuff that didn't work. And from that, I would make videos. I'd show the stuff so other people can follow the experience I went through and make their own internet adapters. Because like, if I just would have released it, what fun is that? Where everyone just, copies what I've done and duplicates it. How great was it for people to create something, reverse engineer what I've done and been like, F yeah, I did it, right? Like I did it. And I wanted that to be things that people felt. So I think Leo and I hooking up at the very beginning like that was, that turned into a pretty fun time.
And the same thing happened with Santo. Santo had the same problems. By the way, Santo of Vintage Computers here, he's been so helpful, by the way. Just wanted to give a shout out to him because he's been so good to us. But what happened was he had a NABU PC and floppies and that kind of stuff. And I had the floppies, but I didn't have a working floppy nor piece stuff at the time. So I hadn't actually met him, and he said, send me the floppies and I'll get it to work. And I'm like, I don't really want to send anything out, but I'll tell you what, I have a couple of here that are actually backups of my system disk and so on. They're surplus. You can give it a crap. So he tried. Like he basically he copied it with a cryoflux right away, and then he booted it. He went, oh, it boots. Thank you. So all that pushed all of that stuff going with all the floppy activity. And those guys with Grant Kleinball, they did they reversed engineered the floppy. Santo had a floppy card, so they reversed engineered the floppy card, and those are for sale now, as you've seen, right? They're having trouble sourcing this floppy disk controller chip though. The FTC chip apparently is very hard to find. But I've also given them the RS-232 card, and I spent hours and hours and hours following traces and using a tester going back and forth, making sure there's continuity and what the voltages were and that kind of stuff. And now that we have an RS-232 card as well. So all of that is happening as a result of stuff that I'm revealing, because I had those systems. I had the RS-232 card, which nobody had. And I also have the hard drive interface, which nobody has, but I've hopefully I've documented that. I think, Brian, you wanted to take a crack at that at some point.
Yeah, I've got a lot of it, like just from the pictures done. It will be helpful to have some continuity testing for a few things where.
Yeah, and as I said, if you want to do that, we want to go through. I have at least 3 of them. I just saw one of them I had a broken chip, like it literally had a popped chip. I think the pictures that but I have other HTC that's really an interface from bus to bus interface.
Yeah.
So it's not really that complicated. It's the tandem card as well between those 2 pieces together.
It's the same thing for like the Epson QX10. It has like a host card that's fairly simple and just translates it to a WD-1002 card.
Right. Now, see, that is the holy grail, guy, because there's that hard drive there was a CabServe system / development drive. So that is the most likelihood to have all the other games and stuff that have been, and a snapshot of things that happened at a specific time. So I really, really, really want to recover that particular hard drive. So that's why that guy got all put in shrink wrap and put on the shelf, because if I turn once I turn that power supply on, I guarantee you smoke is going to come flying out of it. So I'd rather have somebody take a good peek at it, make sure that the smoke isn't going to fly out of it when I turn it on, because it's the last chance of getting anything.
I think if you don't get too far in the fall, I have like 900 little projects I've been working on. One of them too, the 1600 NABU video I did.
Yep.
It uses the WD 1000.
Well, it is that those our hard drive systems were 1600 MSUs.
Yeah.
And
so what I've done is I just got the data sheet for it, and it's actually pretty basic protocol. So I ordered off, and I know anyone else who wants to do this too, off Amazon, you can order the DB. What is it, like a DB38 or DB33 or something? Just check the
DB37, I think.
37, there it is. Yeah, you can order that to an actual breakout. So they're on Amazon. They're like $12. I ordered one of them, and you plug it in. So what I started doing is actually just doing an Arduino conversion to emulate it. So going through the messaging on the data sheet, you can actually just I can get OKs. I can actually get it to detect the controller right now. I just don't do anything else. Doing the MFM conversion and everything else, I'll rely on a GoTech or something for that. But maybe, I don't know. But anyway, I think that
those boards, the protocol is like almost the same thing as a standard IDE protocol, same set of task registers, and there's a few differences in them, but like the basic subset of commands is pretty simple.
Yeah, very simple. And it's a parallel. It's like 8-bit line, and there's a control line, and there's a bidirectional line as well. And as long as you just follow the data sheet and actually look at, because it gives you, like, I can't believe how detailed the data sheet is. You can reverse engineer the entire thing without even having to look at a piece of code. It's such a great written data sheet for what is it again? WD.
It's a 1001, I think.
Yeah,
1001.
There's the 1000, 1001, 1002, and they're all like basically the same thing. With I think the 1001 added like parity or something like that, or ECC, whereas like the 1000 didn't have ECC.
And if you don't search through your information correctly, you'll find out that in sometime in like the late 2000s, they released a hard drive called the WC 1001,
which had the controller.
Yeah, but didn't have that controller. It was like entirely different. It was like an IDE. I don't think it was SATA, but
anyway,
it was just like I kept coming across like an actual physical hard drive versus the controller. So I was learning a lot during that 1600 video. But,
well, you can have the case. As I said, I have 2 cases. One that has, so I have I have 2 1600 MSU cases. One that's missing the hard drive from it and the hard drive controller cards. So you're gonna have to source those guys yourself. But at least you'll have the case, which is a 1600 case.
Then I found if you go on eBay, sometimes you'll find a WD 1001 controller, and literally the output pins. Like if you want to see how it connects to the NABU of the 1600, it's really just the controller pin to pin directly to the NABU. Like they didn't put there's no intelligence in between the two. There's no circuit board with like moving things around or doing something. There's nothing. It's just hookup. But I
Okay.
looked online on eBay and they're all like, and this is what scares me for, not untested.
Yeah,
Untested
2,000
Yeah.
bucks.
eBay. So people complain sometimes in my videos, they see all my collection of vintage computing and vintage gaming and I have Raspberry Pis in them. And they're like, oh, I can't believe you did that. Well, I have been the victim of untested on eBay.
Yeah.
And the sellers are so smart. What they do is and this is actually with my Fairchild. I have a YouTube video where I was hacking a Fairchild Channel F. And what the Fairchild was, it was actually every single broken part of like 10 different Fairchilds were put into this one Fairchild and it was sold to me as non-working. Like the joysticks were broken, the buttons were broken, like the circuit board had a crack in it. It was missing screws. It was clearly taken apart. It was just a collection of broken parts, untested, it said, right? Just untested. And I paid 187 bucks or something stupid for it. Yeah. So that's why I end up with all these Raspberry Pis in my stuff, but never a NABU. It's never going to get a Pi.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I've got a spare 1001 that I bought off eBay, which I still needed to get around to testing sometime back. I have a 1002 that I know works that came with an actual MFM hard drive for my QX 10 systems or whatever. So
Where are you, Brian? Where are you? You're in the States somewhere?
States, Midwest, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Midwest?
cool.
Okay.
I used to work for Arbortext. It was a big thing, and I used to go there all the time, Ann Arbor. I think that cool football stadium that's dug deep in the ground.
What did you used to work for?
Arbortext.
Arbortext.
Yeah.
What did they do?
Document management, mostly
Okay.
software, XML,
Yeah.
editing software, etc. At the time, bought by PTC, then
Mhm.
disappeared from Ann Arbor. But I used to be there all the time, so
Yeah.
that's neat. It's an easy flight from Ottawa. It's because it's an hour, and then just Ottawa to Detroit direct flights. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should meet up sometime. Hopefully they'll invite us to one of these things and pay for us, right, Jeffrey?
Yes, I do have that discretion as the showrunner of VCF East to pay for you to come to our show. Yes, and because I did very well this year, choosing the people that I chose, and this would be a big draw. NABU is very hot now, and we definitely, if you get the three of you coming in person, yeah, it would be
Yeah.
very possible with this.
I really enjoyed watching all of the VCFE videos that were published in the last couple months. And Brian, watching your presentation, and everything too. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Yeah, it was. It's really nice.
Watching people walking through the event with their cameras. I just really wished I was there. I must have spent it. It was kind of funny because when it first happened, I didn't see any videos pop up for a while, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh man, there's got to be something. There's got to be something." And then one day, I don't know what it was, but it was 2 weeks later. All of a sudden, in my newsfeed, there was 30 videos popped up, and it was freaking great to watch. You had such a good headline of the YouTubers. I didn't belong up there, man. Those guys that were up there were such all-stars, guys that I follow. It was just super, super cool to see. You put on a good event, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it was good, and it was a lot of fun. Now, besides our technical problems that we had there, it ended up working quite well. But I thought actually I probably would have been more glib with my my presentation if I would have done it live there. So it would have been weird.
Yeah, it was very good. I know, I had originally got the idea from VCF Midwest 2 years ago when they did a panel of 3 people, and I was like, I need to do that. And it didn't happen last VCF, but then I was like, Bill Hurd helped me to get some people. Some people were either on the fence or reluctant because they want, in for whatever reason. And then he's like, so he helped me to get it. And then some other people were just, pretty easy. Oh yeah, I'll go. I'm just an ordinary Joe, so I need financial assistance. Okay, we'll help you pay for your flights. So it worked out well. And I'm like, you know what, this formula works really well. We got, a ton of people coming to our show and lots of interest. So I'm going to keep going with this. And it doesn't have to be just, YouTube streamers. It could be anybody. It'll just be a round table of people. But yeah, Adrian was in terms of the advertising, he got the most hits when we posted it
Adrian's pretty big.
So it's great. I'll just keep going with this model and run with it. In fact, it was just too much. I'd squeezed so many different. So I did the same thing last year, and I promised I wouldn't do it this year, but I did it this year. I packed the schedule with so many people. In fact, I expanded it. Usually it's like 9 to 5 or something like. So I added another hour. There was no lunch break for the video guys. I'm like, next year, I promise you, I'll lock it in, a lunch break for you guys, because it was like packed. Like there's 20 talks. I counted them Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 20 talks. And then the round tables were great because, once you get the people going, it works really well. So we'll just keep going with it. People are having fun, people showing up. Whoever thought vintage computers would still be popular in 2023, and it's great. It's fun, and I have different ideas to improve it. Especially consignment, because it was like literally a 2-hour wait. To get
I was surprised the first time, like I walked to that building when consignment was open. I was like, "What is this line for?"
It's
like out the door.
Yes, it was out the door. Like, well, so I forget which day it was, Friday or Saturday, but so we opened, that was the other thing. I opened up an hour earlier at 7:30 a.m. And then the parking lot was already filled at 8:30 a.m., the main parking lots. And then people were already lining up right away for consignment, even though it didn't open until 9 a.m. They were lining up at 7:30.
Wow.
Into consignment. So it's a big thing.
You had some good stuff there. I was lining up a few of those things. There was like an analog computer kit or something. I think it was one of them, or a microprocessor kit. And I'm like, I want to be there right now.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of good stuff pops up there. And I know we have swap meets, and some people are like, saying, it's a long drive just for a swap meet, but we do have a swap meet in June and in October. But the show itself is just because there's so many different things, it's worth people taking a long drive, time off from work, whatever expenses, because it's not just one thing, it's many things. And great thing that also happened was all these like smaller time YouTubers or streamers, they were streaming all like 12 different people, like I never heard of them. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
Word is spreading. And the other great thing is that, I wanted to have someone designated to go around the show and record, the halls and interview people. Well, these guys did it for me, and I didn't even have to do anything. And there's like, oh, here, look at this guy, and let me talk to this guy, and look at this, thing. And so it's great because then, then I can, then I was like, who's this guy? And like, I'm going to invite him next year. He's like, he doesn't have a lot of people on the channel, but he's really good at speaking, and it'll be fun,
Cool. I look forward to it. As I said, if you invite us, maybe we can get our shit together this time, DJ. It's like
So the invitation is at VCF East is April of next year. It's 1 week after Easter. It's April 5th, 6th, and 7th at the same place, Wall Township, New Jersey, InfoAge campus. We do have plans to move consignment to a different location. There's 2 possible locations. One we really want, but the township has to approve it. It's an empty warehouse area. And then the second area is a firehouse, a former firehouse. So those are ideas to make it consignment a lot better. But so, I'm working on it. We did a post-mortem and like what we can do to improve, but you're invited now. Officially.
Brian, Leo, are we in?
I'm in.
Yeah. I don't want to go through another time like I did last time, watching it after the fact with all this like, I wish I was there. So yeah,
I was disappointed that neither of you were able to make it this year.
Yeah.
Kind of looking forward to seeing you.
So I tell people every year, just come to VCF East. You won't be disappointed. And then there was a guy who said, there's no excuse for not making it to VCF East if you're within 20 hours driving distance.
Wow.
He drives from Florida to New Jersey.
That's pretty much North America. Yeah.
Well, that was the plan for DJ and I originally, but
yeah, we had our plan. I was going to leave from here, from my cabin, because I spent the winter here, as everybody knows in my YouTube videos, showing off the lake and the ice. And I was going to go down to Ottawa and then spend a couple days there, and then head out to VCFE.
So yeah, we'll lock you into like, a certain area, and I'll talk to you guys, Leo and others, to see if we can get some of the other developers or artists involved with it. As I said privately before, the theme show is the Rise of the GUI, but then the second theme is computer art. So if we could get some artists in there that worked on the game, or any other employees, it'd be great. I don't know where they're all living now, but it'll be great to have them.
Well, I know of two. Edmund Hum is still in Ottawa, from what I could tell. So I'm going to try to contact him. He said we've already linked on LinkedIn. I just have been so busy. I haven't been seeing all the thousands of people that, not thousands, but tens of people that have linked to me that are NABU related and that kind of stuff. I haven't been able to get back to everybody. I did speak to Tanya Thompson, who, as I said, mentioned that worked on Bounty Bob and some other stuff. She also did, that ski Sarajevo graphic, the one with the guy really goofy. I was talking to John Short about that the other day.
38 ski games on the NABU.
Well, they're different courses. That's the point, right?
Sure. Sure.
But the one that ski Sarajevo, it's got the guy like his skis crossed and that kind of stuff. Marketing absolutely hated that graphic, and all the developers loved it, and that's why it stayed. It was one of those battles that it was like, no, this is just too good. We're leaving this one in.
I'd love to see here.
They wanted to make a big action one, like a fierce looking guy with laser beams out of his eyes or something. I don't know, but
it would be fun to hear somebody talk about, because I don't know if I've seen it, because I was doing a lot of TMS99 searches about doing graphic artwork on TMS99. It was an art because of the way the video chip works. Like, it is so frustrating when I was trying to learn how to use it. I don't know, Brian.
I got to show you that if I can find, as I said, if I can find the application, it was an application called NED, which just meant NABU editor, like literally 3 letters of type. And that one was the thing that made those graphics, Bounty Bob, all of those sub screens that you see and so on. That was the application that was used, and it's somewhere on those disks, right? So that's imperative for me to get all of those stupid disks and all of that hard drive done so that I can start having fun again, because this is tedious as hell.
to develop for these old computers, you needed either assembly or C, but mostly it was assembler. But not only that, you needed to understand how to create tiles and understand how to create sprites with 2 colors and tiles with only 2 colors. Like, the planning involved, it's not just assembler. It doesn't stop at assembler. The respect I have, Leo, for you and other game programmers of that era, it's like, people look at it, oh yeah, I know assembler, I can make a game. Yeah, good luck with the TMS99. Right? Like, Production Dave is learning this right now, and he's doing an amazing job with Space Invaders.
Well, and that was the point of actually Production Dave. I wanted to get the NABU code so he could get going, because that technique that he was describing, that's right there. That's how I did the eyes. As I moved them, I just shifted the eyes, and it worked really, really well for Pac-Man. So it worked really, really well for him, and it's the same code, so he can try to see what he could make use of it. But that's the point of releasing the Pac-Man code, and that's the point of releasing Miner and all of the other stuff, is so that people that are interested, like you say, that do say, like, I see this and I would like to do something that's NABU related and that kind of stuff. Here's an example that I can start working from. This is how they did it in the past. This is what they called, these are routines. Here's all the API that we had. And if you go to the forums of NABU to see if you're working on the project, at least I can give you that level of support as, yeah, we did that. If you can trigger my memory and say, oh yeah, there was some stupid reason we used that particular thing versus some other thing, because it was always a pain in the ass because of this, that, and the other thing. Right?
That was the same thing with the Commodore Roundtable. Like, last year we had 13 Commodore employees. One person didn't remember one thing, but then it's triggered their memory of like what, someone else had remembered. So it's like,
Yeah. And a guy like Eric Mesdag was something I was dealing with recently. He knew a lot of different little fiddly bits like that. So that's what I'd like to get to talk to him. Also, he has all the grunt presses from beginning to end. So that would be tremendous history in there.
Sounds like a NABU roundtable is forming. In the future, I can see it forming. All right.
If I have a year lead time, I can start planning try to find stuff. And hopefully
you have 11 months, actually 10 months now. 10
Starting
months.
today.
Go.
Yes. No, okay, I'll put all those floppies aside.
So Brian, do you want to tell how you got involved with this whole NABU stuff? How did that happen with you? Did you suddenly one day you saw Adrian's video or something?
That's basically it. Last November I was like looking on YouTube and saw Adrian's video and came about and like, that looks interesting. I think I ordered it around either the day or the day after. It was like, I think around November 22nd or something like that is when I think I ordered it. And so did 700 other people. So while I ordered it at the end of November, it didn't get here till like the second week of December or so. And in that time, I was like, I bet I could like whip together an emulator core in that time.
I bet you we can look
James,
back, find the
James,
date.
the guy that like was selling them, had helpfully like produced a schematic already, so I had that to work with, which greatly simplified it things because I knew how the system was connected and how I had to connect it up in the emulator. So
We have to find the exact days, and because I can go through YouTube videos and I can kind of piece things together, because I think dates are going to be fun, maybe to put together like a chronological date. Like when Leo contacted me, when Brian and I first started talking, because I think he messaged me first on YouTube, right?
Yeah, the first message was on one of your YouTube videos.
Yeah, and then we started talking like on RetroNet 300 baud.
Yeah.
Every night. It was like every night I'd go on, it would be like you and Wormy. Remember Wormy?
Yeah.
And,
Worm's great. He's been producing the Windows builds of my emulator since I use Linux exclusively. So
yeah, there's so many people helped out. Like I know I don't have much longer in the chat, but I want to give shout outs to like John's Basement. Man, John, your CPM series and your Z80 series, like doing the CPM BIOS, like that's Cloud CPM. That's how I started it, right? Except I chose to do some of it in C, which it's now migrated mostly to assembler because that was the wrong thing to do. It was a project. The Z88 DK guys, like Dom, wow, like I just showed up one day, was just like, hey, NABU. He's like, I know NABU. I saw your videos. Let's make Z88 DK work with NABU. That was super great.
That's
right?
great. Yeah.
Production Dave, he's helped me realize that the Z80 3.4 megahertz is too fast for the TMS99, so I just can't do direct memory copies using an assembler.
The rule was, by the way, for copying is 768 bytes. You can copy 768 bytes in one VBI and one VBI as it moves, and that's the rule that we used. And if you look at the code, everybody who followed it very, very religiously, and then all the games have no snow or graphics, which you can, as you see, you can actually do with the TMS99T.
Yeah,
really easily.
Yeah,
you can't use outer or whatever it is, right?
Exactly. You have to be really careful on interrupts, man.
Yeah, I think I actually, if you look at NABU loop, I think I'm outering like in loops. I think I do like chunks, and then I loop that in increment. Yeah. But either way, like having the I think Leo, you and I talked about this before, and came up with it was a double buffer. Yeah. So
that's how Pac-Man works. It's pure double buffer.
Right.
Because you can't trust the video memory it takes too long.
Yeah, I know. Especially reading like my first version of Scroll, and Brian, you can remember this on RetroNet. Remember my first Scroll? It was painfully slow because I would like read from video memory, move the bytes around. It's embarrassing when I think about it now. So many lessons learned.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are good things that we did? Oh, did you have any questions left?
Let me see. So there hasn't been a lot in the chat. Someone did mention
somebody will give me help with the floppy disks. I'd like to know. That's actually I'd like to get somebody. I'd like to find somebody who knows a lot more about that stuff so they can get the.
Well, Alex J. Cox.
He just said.
Yeah.
So I'll try to get in contact with you, Alexander. You're on the Discords, so I would imagine, right?
Yes, he's on the Discord, yeah.
And we'll try to see if we can do something with those, because that would be something that would be really nice to have by next year, is having them all the stuff that's available to be archived, yanked out of whatever hole it's in. The best way to put it. And as I said, work needs to be done with it. I've already extracted stuff that I know is mangled, so. There's other people that are smarter that are able to put that stuff together, and I'd like to talk to them.
Yeah. So there was this kind of, I thought of this question. Can NABU play Doom?
No.
What are you talking about? It's in an internet adapter. Doom's there.
Sure. I guess that you could consider that Doom.
I guess in some metaverses.
I had the funnest day when I launched that out, because the comments I got and the YouTube emails I got were the funniest thing. Rick rolling, because and I think Brian, you saw this because at the back in the early days of the videos, I do a video saying like I was able to crack something, and then people would show up on the YouTube comment and be like, I was expecting a Rickroll, but you actually figured this out. So then that one day I was playing this in my head. I'm like, there's going to be a day I'm going to Rickroll everybody, and that was Doom. Was it?
Yeah, it was excellent.
Could Doom run on it? Well, that's interesting. So I do have another project. I should throw this. I think it's in GitHub. So I have a bitmap line drawing. I actually use the VRAM for doing bitmap graphics, and I have a program too, just rotating a square on the screen. You have to do that, right? As soon as you figure out how to do any bitmap graphics. So it's hard to do bitmap graphics with the TMS-99. So you probably could do it. I kind of have some ideas of doing various tiles that have angles on them, so that you could do like a Wolfenstein type game, because I've been watching who was it recently, someone did a C64 review of some 3D games in it, and it looked like it was kind of done with that same premise in mind, even though the graphics tips are different. So I think Jeffrey, we might see it happen. It might look like Atari's Doom.
Yeah.
Atari has a Doom. Wow.
I think so. I think everything's got a Doom, man.
It seems to be the test now. Can you play Doom?
Yeah. If it's 3D, it kind of resembles the first level. I mean, that's good enough to get.
But as I said, there was a game that was 3D like that called Tank Commander, and that was the one that was like Tron, and it was pretty impressive. So theoretically, you could have done something closer to like Wolf 3D. That would have been possible. Not Doom, but Wolf 3D, certainly.
Oh, Wolfenstein 3D, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely that.
The Doom on retro devices is essentially Wolf 3D with just trying to look like the Doom level. Anyway,
exactly.
So, yeah, but Wolf 3D, I think you can get close to that. Some ray tracing.
No, we did do it. That's why I just got to recover the application. You can see.
Find it.
You'll go, aha, Doom is possible, or at least Wolf 3D.
Yeah. The most arithmetic intensive stuff I'd done on the Z80 was actually for that robot, where I controlled the robot using my own version of Logo. Because I needed to be able to, and I was using the bitmap graphics on that too. I think that's actually in GitHub. So what I had to do is I couldn't actually use the math.h sine and cosine to be able to get angles to draw pixels for direction it was going based on, because it's heading direction, right? So it's like you turn the robot 45 degrees or 33 degrees, your heading is now changed. So now every time you move, you have to move that pixel that direction. So I couldn't use the sine and cosine because it was just too slow. So I actually had to use I created a sine and cosine array. 360 degrees. And I was able to do it that way. So I can kind of start seeing how we can piece things together to get a 3D game working with some ray tracing and tiles. Actually,
Definitely well, that's the way you have to do it. Is you have to set the tiles in advance, and you're cool, and then flip through them. Like,
so
that's how Tank Commander works.
Yeah.
So I have a question here. Did anyone create a utility for automatic creation optimization for the TMS-99-1A? Give it a bitmap and find the tiles. I lost the question. Find the best tiles, particularly when the picture is bigger than the tile memory area.
Yeah. Well,
you mean like if you're if you're doing it programmatically, trying to create a tile?
I don't know. I don't know what the question is. You're going to ask them to clarify. So I'll ask them to clarify. In the meantime, someone says Rudy's Retro Intel says he'll have hard copies of his NABU diagnostic manual to hand out and his diagnostic board. So
yes, and actually, Rudy has sent me that board. I've got to assemble it. So, Rudy, thank you very much for that board. I got to get the pieces. It's the LED ones, yes.
Yeah, I think that looks neat.
That's what I need, because my broken NPCs equals something. I just need a bit of insight into what's actually broken and what trace is not happening, and what capacitor is broken, or who knows.
Don't worry, Brian. It doesn't step on your MAME debug. You're still You're still like.
No, I want to fix
Brian. Thank you, Brian.
No, I'm still the MAME is the one I'm using right now exclusively, because I can't pull all those things off the shelf.
Yeah, like finding problems. Just hit tilde, jump into debug mode. Everything stops.
Did somebody make so that we could use a standard joystick at some point with the MAME ones?
Yeah, you could do that with my emulator, or even Production Dave. Not Production Dave, Masto, the guy who did NABU.run.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Masto has a piece of hardware he's selling where you can use a PS2 joystick or PS2.
No, I saw
keyboard.
that one. Yeah, so that's a little box, little blue box thing that you said make it with
Yeah.
4.
Yeah, I said make it with 4 joysticks.
More.
More. Yeah. He's like, and his response was like, I'm done this. I'm moving on. I'm like,
Yeah.
I get that.
Oh,
Cheers.
Well, he should add paddle support, since like apparently paddle support is currently broken on the mainline NABU
Yeah.
board.
Right. Yeah.
there you go, Masto.
So, Leo, are you asking for maybe like USB to Atari conversion?
No, just whatever Windows joystick to MAME.
Oh yeah,
I'd-
right. That
I-
works.
Yeah, you can plug whatever USB joystick into your thing.
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
and
I
make
haven't.
whatever
haven't
buttons
tried.
and directions you want into MAME.
Yeah.
Right, cool. And there's other things that, as I said, there's lots of other stuff that recover, and I'd like to get. So there's some more gambling games, there's casino bingo and stuff like that. Plus, I have some of the code for those guys, so that would be good to pop up so that people have more code. I'd like to see people play with the code some more. I recognize that a lot of people are going, "Holy crap!" But you have to admit, I did comment it pretty well. Even I was going, "Oh, I'm amazed I was so meticulous here," because
I like to read your comments. When you first sent me Pac-Man, and I did that
Yeah.
video where Pac-Man was just like super garbled.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went through. I loved reading your comments. It was fun.
Yeah. well,
So
and
I-
you
Go ahead.
go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I had a question. So there's a Toronto pet user group. There's a guy who makes a lot of new games for Commodore Pets. And one of the games he made was Portal. You know Portal? It's like a modern game. He made Portal for the Commodore Pet. So what the three of you, what modern game would you like to see adapted to the NABU that you play nowadays? I mean, it's like amazingly obviously you have to modify it greatly to make some of these things work, but think about that.
But instead of saying, does Doom run on it? Like, does X run on it?
Yes.
I'm just so not a gamer.
As somebody who's
know.
done stuff and knows what is capable and has followed it, a good multi-user game that you could play with sprites and that kind of stuff, and literally like a 2D, like something like RuneScape, right? That exists right now. If anybody's familiar with RuneScape, essentially that on an NABU would be perfectly possible.
Or a
with
dungeon
cloud
crawler.
CPU. Any dungeon crawler like that, yes.
Yeah. So in RetroNet, actually, a lot of people don't know this yet because I haven't released it. But in RetroNet, actually, the server. Remember, Leo and you and I were talking about it. I actually added like multiplayer support. So what you could do is you can actually, for an application, it's very, very. I need a web interface. Here's why: you create a GUID, your application gets a GUID, your user gets a GUID, and then they're just uniquely identified IDs. And then you can send data in, and then anyone else on that same GUID gets the broadcast back. Okay, that's the RetroNet server can do that. The only thing is I didn't actually make it do anything because it would be nice to actually assign random GUIDs so people just don't like, oh, cool, 69, dude, right? Like that's just their random GUID or whatever, right? Because everyone's going to want to make maybe the same number, just 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So nice to have a web interface where you can like, and I have it on nabu.ca asking if people want to do some web stuff and like help us out making all these things, that'd be great. Because I mean, I get bored of doing stuff. I'm like, oh, I'll do this instead. So a dungeon crawler was what I had in mind.
Yeah.
And that's like just 3D based, like dungeon crawler, or you just, because you can just have like a map and you can just have a room and just say, you can have different characters for what the room should look like, right? So a value of 1 might just mean you can go forward. So it just draws a forward. A value of 2 might mean forward with red walls or green walls, right? A value of 5 might mean you can go left only. Well, the left is this way. So you can go left only, right? So you create this map and then it just draws it out. And then you can also say what room somebody currently is in. And that would be super wild, right? Yep. The other one is,
all of them are good ideas.
Yeah, and of course, Halt and Catch Fire fans want to see a graphic chat. Right? So we need Cameron how to do that.
Oh my God.
So let me circle back. There was a person who had asked about they said, were there any utilities for processing art from better graphics into NABU form? I guess, does that make any sense?
Well,
okay. So, from our point of view, in the old days, the answer is no. There was no formats, so we just had our format.
So to answer the question, there could be 2 questions. I'll answer both because it could be 2 questions asked and not 2 answers. One could be, can I make a slideshow full image? Like, can I just take a GIF or a JPEG and convert that into a full NABU image? That's a program that was created by the guy I was talking to earlier, who became a good friend and told me about the TMS. And I can't remember what it's called, but if you go to nabu.ca, look inside the quiver, you'll see it. And it will convert any JPEG or any PNG or any image at all, anything in your clipboard, to a image that will render on the TMS 99 full screen. And I'm not even supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Louis, the guy who made the F18 cheap version, right? You guys know about that? Yeah, check it out. It's like the DIY version. One of my engineers at the office actually is going to be like order a shit ton of boards. Oop, can I swear? This is my first time.
You can swear, yes, because it's not for kids, so we can.
I tried so hard not to swear. I mean, I'm a Thunder Bay boy, right? Like small town hockey town boy. So anyway, he's created a bunch of circuit boards so people can put them together themselves. But yeah, the other answer to the question. Oh, sorry. So what Louis is doing is Louis actually got like a new version of it that can do like 256 colors. He sent me a screenshot of his F18 new firmware that's coming out. And he's also got a new version of it, which will do like double the resolution or something. So we might start seeing some crazy NABU graphics. And I think those will be supported in this conversion program. The second answer to the question, because the first one is how to convert a JPEG into a full screen. The second one is if you want to create a sprite or a tile. If you go to nabu.ca and look in the quiver, there's also some other programs in there that are recommended to do so. And you can't just copy and paste from a JPEG to put it into it, because unfortunately it's just not, this is not compatible, right? You only have two colors to work with, your background color and your foreground color, and or in some transparency. So you can look at those, look on nabu.ca and the quiver and find it. Hopefully that answers your question if you're looking at making software or something.
All right. And one other question, when are we getting the video info about the Proto 4 port NABU keyboard?
I'm sorry. I have the video on my phone right now because I make the phone videos. I'll do it tomorrow. All right, we'll publish it tomorrow. I did not copy the ROM yet. I haven't copied the ROM off, but at least I'll do the video. So you're going to see the whole thing. I'll do it tomorrow. You got it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have here. I don't know. You guys can keep going if you want.
Oh, we're gonna have to get something to eat.
All right, so let's wrap it up. I think we answered all the questions that I have here. I really appreciate it, guys. I can see you guys really had fun with it, and that's great.
Yeah.
It shows through to the audience out there. So thank you, Leo, for coming in a follow up. And he says, great. This is, the question and answer that I wanted to do, where the show didn't turn out so well, but now this is great. This is a good follow up. And DJ, thank you for also attending it. It makes it robust when you have multiple people chiming in and bouncing off each other. I appreciate that. And thank you, Brian. It's great to make the emulator, all of you, added to the conversation. And so I, invite you all to come to VCF East next year.
11 months, we're there.
Look forward to it.
Any last words, Leo?
Oh no, everybody have fun with all the NABU stuff that are releasing, and I'm just and if you have any good ideas, then drop them down on forums at nabu.ca, and so I can see them, or in the YouTube comments as well.
All right, last words, DJ.
I'm good. Thank you so much for the community and welcoming me into this retro world. I'm new to it, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
And last words, Brian.
Just happy to be part of the community too. It was fun actually going to VCF East and giving a talk this year. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I was glad to have you. It was, it was very good to have, the technical side to it. Yeah, really good. All right. Well, then, thank you, everyone, and have a good night. I'm going to stop the streaming now.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.
Go Vegas.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.